Other against the Minister of Transport, Fikile Mbalula. In the case against the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, 7 of us have brought a case of defamation. That matter has now been waiting to get onto a court roll for the last 4 years. I know that my co-moderator, Tsepo Khadima, has got several cases that just can't get onto a courtroom. Together with Democracy in Action, and as I've said, several other organizations and lawyers, we will be holding that press conference, announcing those cases and also announcing the action that we intend to take. That press conference will be both virtual and physical. Journalists, in addition to being able to come to the press conference, those social media platforms together with the physical attendance of the press conference. A number of lawyers will be present at the press conference also, among them Andries Nkome, and also lawyers from the very well-known law firm Posa and Lewis. I now want to give the opportunity to my co-moderator, Tsepo Khadima, to make a small and short input about the ongoing persecution of President Jacob Zuma. After that, I will then introduce our 2 guests, as I've indicated, Mzwanele Manyi and Paul Ngobeni, who will give us a further introduction, and then, as usual, we will open up for your participation in these Twitter spaces. Tsepo, I'm handing over to you to do the further introduction. And after that, we will go over to Mzwanele Manyi and Paul Ngobeni. The mic is yours, Tsepo.
Thank you very much, Mpangazita, and greetings to all the listeners on this In My Crosshairs Twitter space. It is really wonderful that I think as South Africans and people of the world, you continue to be interested in finding solutions to the issues that are vexing our nation. And tonight, the country of South Africa is poorer and democracy is nil. Because all the promises in our constitution, they are like a check that bounces every time you go to the banking counter to cash it in. I think at the end of this Twitter space and on the inputs that are going to be made by these 2 eminent speakers, Mzwanele Manyi as well as Paul Ngobeni, we will all come to the realization that we have to join hands in the march to defeat what is otherwise a fascist regime of Cyril Ramaphosa. Because the refusal for President Zuma, and as I would like to address him as His Excellency Rais Mzee Mwalimu Gedleyihlekisa Jacob Zuma, his full titles, because that is indeed who he is. He's not only an old man, a wise old man, which is the name Mzee from Swahili, that's what it means. But also he's Rais, having had the privilege to have been president of this country, as the title goes in Swahili as well, Rais. But also Mwalimu, he's a great teacher. And in fact, correctional services and the fascist regime of Cyril Ramaphosa have robbed South Africans the opportunity to continue to learn from this great son of the soil, Mzee Gedleyihlekisa Jacob Zuma. But all is not lost, because many of you who have joined here, I believe that you are demonstrating, and even those that will listen offline, you are demonstrating your interest, your patriotism, to want to find ways and means whereby this totalitarian fascist regime can be defeated and must be brought down. And the promises that are in our constitution, freedom of speech being one of them, which is also recognized by the United Nations as a fundamental right, that it must be able to live on and live for every single person. And I think if indeed the fascist regime of Cyril Ramaphosa had the people of the well-being and the goodwill of the people of South Africa at heart, they would then have followed on what Thomas Jefferson said, that I may disagree with what you have to say, but I will defend it with my life if necessary. Your right to say whatever that it is, because freedom of speech is one of the fundamental rights that we must never lose. And unfortunately, tonight we sit here with Mzee Rais Jacob Zuma's voice being muzzled, and therefore he's not going to be able to teach for South Africa to be a better place than it has been. But all is not lost. Let us continue to fight on until we gain victory, and we must march on to victory. Thank you, Mpangazita.
Thank you so much, Seppo. Can I ask Comrade Manyi to please open his mic so that I can give him the opportunity to speak? I see he's registered as a listener, but he's not requested to be speaking. While we wait for that, I see that Comrade Nkoshishentsha Shezi has joined us. Comrade Shezi, I want to give you the opportunity while we wait for Comrade Manyi to open the mic to give us that short report back that I've referred to earlier. I know that you also want to say quite a lot about the particular topic of the evening, but I request you to hold back on that at the moment so that we give our two guests an opportunity to speak on it, and then I will bring you back into the conversation and allow you to make the input that I know you will be so capable of making. The mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Comrade Carl. Greetings to your co-host, Seppo, your distinguished guest, Comrade Manyi. I see there's Comrade Kim. Comrade, we are delighted to say that in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, we are organizing a number of actions that will be premised on the fact that we want Cyril Ramaphosa to go because he has contravened our laws as the sitting president of the country. And as the president of the ANC must find it in itself to let him go because he is bringing the good, glorious movement down, the reputation down. But I must also indicate that we did sit at Durban, as I alluded to on the last speaker, and we are going to sit for tomorrow. And again, I'm not going to disclose the venue for the meeting, but it is in Durban. And what we have decided is that on the 7th of July, which is the day a year ago, President Jacob Zuma was illegally incarcerated and sent to prison by our constitutional court. And therefore, on this day, we are going to commemorate it by going to Durban Central Police Station, as well as the Durban Court, where we'll be demonstrating both our anger at the manner in which President Jacob Zuma was incarcerated, but we'll also be demanding that justice for Phala Farm be made, Cyril Ramaphosa be prosecuted and brought to face justice immediately. And therefore, that meeting will take place tomorrow. And the 7th, the activism activity on the 7th is one of many. People must acknowledge that on the 18th of this month, we are planning a bigger march where we intend to come to Durban CBD and make our presence felt in the CBD of Durban. And we have already been joined by a number of different entities, organizations in the community that represent the youth and different civic organizations. And we still calling for more organizations to join us in this campaign. We have also invited some political parties, and some have already responded with a positive message that they shall be joining us. I think I am at liberty to mention that ATM in KwaZulu-Natal will be with us in doing so. So the preparations are still underway, and we acknowledge the role that real democracy is also playing around this issue in assisting us in making this a reality. We are calling upon the churches and a number of entities to join us. I think at this moment I'll just hold it at that. But before I go, Comrade Carl, if you may allow, that I want to make it known that tomorrow there's going to be a court case where a number of comrades were wrongfully arrested for the events of July last year, where there was uprising. And I do not know how they were identified, but it is said that they are the ones who started the uprising. But I think it is totally wrong, and they need our support, those comrades at Mhlathuze. So that will be happening tomorrow. I think it is important that one brings that to the attention of all of us. As Bangazita always say, that we leave no soldier behind. It is in that spirit that we must be able to acknowledge and give support. Thank you very much, Bangazita.
Thank you so much, Comrade Shezi, and thanks for that very important and correct reminder. You will recall that when I spoke last Monday in front of the Escort Magistrates Court, after I was successful in getting that farcical COVID-19 case dismissed, I referred to the need for all of us to support fellow comrades who are being persecuted. And in this instance, I hope that those who are able to go to the court tomorrow and to support those comrades will do so. We must always show solidarity with each other. I see that both Comrade Mzwanele Manyi and also Paul Ngobeni has now joined us. I know that Paul and perhaps some of the rest of us who are participating in this Twitter space have a challenge of upcoming blackouts, load shedding, which is the bane of our lives under this Ramaphosa regime. But I keep my fingers crossed that we will be able to keep as many of you as possible in this Twitter space conversation. As I'm going to hand over to Comrade Manyi, I want to recall when I first started going to the court cases of President Jacob Zuma. In fact, I was going through some of the photos that I have on my iCloud, and I came upon a picture of more than 22 years ago, where I was standing in front of the court and was raising my concern about the persecution of President Jacob Zuma. Yes, friends and comrades, it is as long as more than 2 decades that President Zuma has been subjected to this kind of persecution. And we cannot forget how the political manipulation happened right from the beginning. We cannot forget those tape-recorded conversations with Leonard McCarthy. We cannot forget that press conference that Bulelani Nguka held, where he was secretly briefing some journalists, telling them that he believes that there was a prima facie case against President Zuma but that he was actually not going to prosecute, but at the same time, he wanted to warn them, he wanted to give an indication. We know all the manipulation. We know the role of Billy Downer as the prosecutor over the years, and we also know how Mr. Downer has been protected by the state and by the system, and how regardless of the overwhelming evidence that there is against him and his manipulation and his wrongful actions within this court case, he has been allowed to continue to stay on as the prosecutor of the so-called arms deals court case. All of these things, including what happened with regards to the Constitutional Court, how the matter of President Zuma and the whole issue around the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture and the concerns that President Zuma raised with regards to the actions, the very biased actions by the chairperson of the Commission, the now Chief Justice Zondo, had been disregarded, how the Constitutional Court rushed to illegally sentence President Zuma to a 15-month prison sentence, while there was still an appeal pending in the appeal court. We know all of these things. We also know the continuing persecution of President Zuma, and we have noted the statements and the very expansive media briefing that was held by the Jacob Zuma Foundation together with President Zuma's lawyers a week ago. It is in that context that I want to ask Comrade Mzwanele Manyi, who is the spokesperson of President Zuma and of the Jacob Zuma Foundation, to come in and to brief us about the current situation. And then once he had spoken to us, I will also hand over to legal expert Paul Ngobeni. Comrade Manyi, the mic is yours.
Hi, Comrade Carl. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you very much for inviting us here. And let me greet your fellow hosts there, Tsepo, I think Kosencha as well, and all the fellow panelists there, Paul and all of them. And on the list of people who have been browsing through here, I saw the unlawfully suspended public protector. And if anyone wants to talk to me about why I think it's unlawful, I'm here to deal with that as well. But I welcome everyone here. I think a lot, I mean, in your own summary, you've already said a lot of things that should have been part of what I need to say. So I will try and summarize perhaps into 10 minutes or so, just the input so that we have more time for discussions. Firstly, just to set the ball rolling, it must just be clear that His Excellency President Zuma is challenging the Zondo report on a whole range of bases. He will be reviewing it. But even before we deal with the specifics of the review, President Zuma is arguing that even the setting up of this foundation was not set up in terms of the prescripts, in terms of how the Constitution is dictating how such commissions should be set up. And those that have got their constitutions in front of them, I direct to here, see Ashraf Gada is here. I want him to deal with this thing in his radio program. The Constitution is very clear on Section 84, subsection 2F, that the person that can appoint the commission is the president. There is nothing in the issue of appointment of the commission that gives a role to a chief justice. So the involvement of the chief justice there was just some creative interpretation of what needs to happen. And it was also premised on a very suspicious ground of saying President Zuma is conflicted because the investigation is about him and all of that. But if you look into what that actually means, it actually means that if President Zuma was to appoint himself a particular judge, the inference here is that that judge would sort of connive with President Zuma. I mean, what other interpretation is there? Even if President Zuma is conflicted, even if he is conflicted, what made Madonsela and everybody else around at that time to think that whatever conflict, real or perceived, is there, is going to affect the independence of whatever judge that is there, even if that judge is known to President Zuma? Surely judges are people of high integrity, or supposedly, and people that are supposed to be able to act without fear or favor. Why is it that all the judges were sort of categorized as people that, if they were chosen by President Zuma, were necessarily going to do something that is untoward? So that's the first round of issues, just to say that the premise of this report in the first place is wrong. And I know I've been dealing with this thing even on Twitter, people saying, but why are you only talking now? The truth of the matter is that, let me give you chronology. In October 2016, this is when the report was issued. In November or so 2016, President Zuma took the matter on review, and he raises issues. So it's not like President Zuma has just woken up now in 2022 about these matters. He has been raising them since 2016. So he took the matter on review in 2016, and this thing dragged on in courts. It dragged on in courts, and just before the conference of the ANC in Nasrec in 2017 came out the result, and this the case was dismissed in court. They said whatever, but bottom line is the case was dismissed and all of that. Conference happened early in 2018. He was then removed. So even the opportunity to review the outcome of that court was just not there, as it were. Tried to even argue issues about costs and whatever. Even that, it was trying to review even the fact that why are you now saying I must pay personally, because I was arguing this thing in my capacity as the president of the country. And then they said, well, personal cost orders are applicable, and they lambasted him with personal cost orders. When he was trying to review that, then midstream, he was removed from the place, and the new administration came in, and they didn't want to carry on any further with that case. This is why President Zuma is sitting with such high bills of legal bills, as it were, because some of those bills are bills that he was doing in his capacity as the president of the republic, but somehow things were twisted and they were made things that have happened to him personally, as it were. So when you talk about the ill treatment of a person, this is exactly what we're talking about. That the person exercises whatever he does in the official capacity, but when the chips are down, the official capacity is put on the side, people deal with you directly. So that's the first round of things. That's the first thing. Then President Zuma, then because of the change of guard and everything, he then had to then proceed with the Zondo Commission. So we go into the Zondo Commission. In the Zondo Commission, other things happened there. Firstly, the notion that President Zuma didn't want to present himself there is a very false and misguided notion, because President Zuma was already there for at least 3 days in that Zondo Commission when he discovered that Zondo is biased. And then he asked him to recuse himself and all of that. And then here's the nub of the issue here, that when Zondo refused, he made his own affidavit. So basically what you have here, you've got two people with two affidavits. You've got Zondo as basically a witness now, because he's now depositing to an affidavit. So he makes his own affidavit. President Zuma makes his own affidavit. And Zondo decides that my affidavit is better than yours. Yours is dismissed. I mean, really, there is no self-respecting judge that can do this and that can sit basically on his own case. This is what Zondo has done in this particular instance. He sat on his own case. He ruled in his favor. And all the media people in the country, and Ashraf is here, must give him a chance to say something. They never said anything about this and all of that. So that is the issue about how President Zuma was getting oppressed. And then he then takes the matter on review, because he then thinks, okay, let me follow the process. Takes the matter on review to the High Court. Now, whilst that review is in process, then Zondo, at the time he was the acting Chief Justice, he goes and he talks to his subordinates at the Constitutional Court to process this matter. And in short, what those his subordinates should have said to him is to point him to the rules of the commission. Rules of the commission had anticipated people that are not coming to the commission. And there's a process they outlined in the rules. And the process is that you can report a person to the police station, take him to the appropriate court, and all of that. So President Zuma should have been taken to either a magistrate court or a high court, and should have gone through some kind of a trial in there so that he can state his case, and the matter could have been debated and concluded one way or the other in that trial court. But instead, the matter was done at the Constitutional Court and all that. And if you look, the Constitution is very clear in terms of the mandate of the Constitutional Court. And there's nothing in the mandate of the Constitutional Court that required the Constitutional Court even entertain this thing. This thing should have been dismissed. If you look at the kinds of things that were dismissed in the Constitutional Court, was quite heavy stuff. I always make an example of two things. I make the example of the guy in Alexander, Colin Kosa, who was killed by the soldiers during the COVID times. And when that case was taken, the life having been lost, that case was chucked out and sent to the High Court or something. That now a life had been lost. And as if that's not enough, the DA as well had gone in there to debate or argue the issue of these COVID regulations and what have you. And the whole issue was about lives that were being lost and all of that. But even the DA case was chucked out. And yet, the Constitutional Court then, out of checking out live cases, they then entertain whether you attended or didn't attend the commission and all that, you know. And as they do this, they again, I mean, you know, for us in the foundation, what was devastating is to hear the highest court in the land saying normal procedures won't apply. I mean, really, what are those normal procedures that won't apply? These are the procedures that would have given President Zuma his rights in terms of the Constitution. His rights to be heard, his right to remain silent, his right to all the rights that are listed there. Is it Section 35? I'm sure Paul is going to talk to those particular sections. But all the rights that you are supposed to enjoy, President Zuma was denied all of those rights. And they decided that no, normal procedures are not going to apply. We're just going to deal with you. So for us as a foundation, we say, okay, so actually what we have here, you have an angry court that was very vengeful and was very angry. And you can even see some of the things that they were referencing there, that we were dealing with angered people and all of that. Now, I mean, at another level, one would be saying, if you were dealing with an aggrieved court that was worried about its own dignity, well, did that court actually have the right local standing to deal with this matter, given the level of how aggrieved they were? You know, they even said that the issue of President Zuma depositing his input into the commission is less important than the dignity of the court. So we're sitting here today with a commission that has spent over 2 billion rand, which was supposed primarily to answer one and one only question. You know, these other corruption things and so on, and I'm not here to condone any corruption. Anybody found to have done anything corrupt, that person must be taken through the processes and all of that. I'm not here to condone any corruption, so this must be abundantly clear to everyone. But the issue here is that fundamentally, this commission was here to deal with one thing and one thing only, mainly, and that is the fact that President Zuma was accused of having abdicated his executive authority to the Guptas. The Guptas were alleged to be appointing ministers. The Guptas were doing this, and there was the line of march was that President Zuma had allowed this. So this was the essence of why this commission was there. Now, if you have the highest court in the land, that's going to say, despite this commission having been set up fundamentally to deal with President Zuma answering to this, and then they say whatever answer is there is less important. What is important is the dignity of the Constitutional Court. This is what happened. So we're sitting here now, 4 years later, wasted billions, and the nub of the issue has not been dealt with. So that's what happened in that situation. At the end of the day, we ended up with President Zuma being jailed without a trial, and it's important for people that are sitting here not to confuse what happened there. A trial only happens in a trial court where you have witnesses, you can call witnesses and all of that. You don't do that at a motion court in a constitutional court, and the Paul can talk in more detail about that. So when you say you've been detained without a trial, it means we didn't go to a trial court. Constitutional court is not a trial court. President Zuma should have been allowed to go to a magistrate or a high court. This didn't happen. When the sentence was given, because now this is the apex court, he's got no right to appeal. You can't appeal because this is the highest court in the land. He also did not have a right to even mitigate his sentence. I mean, this notion, that letter that came out, that to say President Zuma must decide how much time if he's found guilty and all of that, that on its own was also unlawful. You never mitigate a sentence before it's given. Now, these people were trying to actually cover their tracks because they knew that he was not going to have a right to mitigate his sentence because the opportunity is not there. Now they want to do something more unlawful, to say, mitigate your sentence even before we give it. I mean, really, what is that? You know? So President Zuma was not about to participate in something that is ostensibly unlawful. So that's really what happened in that situation. So obviously then President Zuma went to jail and all of that. So we park that set of issues. Then we get to the report itself. Now, when you look at the report, in fact, in that last press conference, I've been asking these journalists here, and even here, ask anybody who's got any evidence that links President Zuma to any of these things that is being accused of. The only thing that you hear is gossip, is innuendo, is conjecture. That's all you hear. You never hear anything. I mean, whether it's Maseko, I dealt with the Maseko thing at the press conference, whether it's Jonas with the 600 million, whether it's Fakey. I mean, Gordon himself was asked by the CNN journalist, Aman Poe. He was asked a direct question by Aman Poe. Aman Poe asked Gordon, he said to him, Mr. Gordon, do you have evidence of any corruption by President Zuma? Direct question. That's what he was asked. And the answer was, no, I don't. But. You know, that's all you have in President Zuma. So President Zuma is here and he's being castigated as if he's a scum of the world. And yet there hasn't been any concrete evidence that is given. Even when, for instance, even when just look at the Gupta at the Gupta plane landing at the at Waterkloof. Let's look at that. You then have a Bruce Kolwane who goes to the commission under oath, and he says, "I did this thing. I did not get any instruction from President Zuma." Guess what the report says? The report says this is highly improbable. I mean, how do you say this when somebody is on affidavit, is under oath and saying, I did not get any instruction from President Zuma, but then you come up with a report that says that is improbable and all that. You know? That's what you get. You get President Ramaphosa there, who goes there and he says, I recommended the name of Brian. And Judge Zondo in there asked him a few times around this thing, and he was very adamant that the name came with him. He recommended Brian because he thought this and that about Brian highly and all of that. And guess what then the report says? The report then says Brian was appointed by the Guptas and all of this. This is despite a head of state having said there that I recommended this person. But the report comes with its own finding. I don't know what informed it, because the question was asked to a head of state and he answered, he said, I recommended Brian, but the report says Brian was appointed by the Guptas and all of this. So that's a kind of a report that we have in there. Park that aside, let me go into the biasness of this report. And I'm going to just talk to one issue only towards my closure. The biasness of this report from where we sit. I mean, one example, two examples actually, with the President Ramaphosa, for instance. He goes there and he deals with the issue of the deployment, and he tried all kinds of fancy footing around how the deployment works and all of that. And Judge Zondo was very clear there that the deployment undermines the transparent recruitment process, which I think it's a fair point by Zondo, that in fact it does, because even if another very strong candidate was to emerge in that interview process, but if the executive authority has been given a line of march from the Niehaus, you've got no place to move. You have to just do that which you've been told to do. And this gets raised there. And Ramaphosa says, no, it's a recommendation and all of that. And he gets allowed to get away with it. What was actually much more devastating in that discussion is the issue around the judges, that he was saying, no, we don't get involved in the issue of recommendations of judges and all of that. People just go through the JSC interviews and all of that. So whilst we thought, okay, let's allow that line to proceed, then as Murphy's Law would have it, the DA pounces on the minutes of the deployment committee. Then it gets clear that in those minutes of the deployment committee, comrades of the ANC that serve in the JSC were actually given names of certain judges that they must support, you know? So basically what we have there, actually Ramaphosa perjured himself. Now you would have thought that if we have a judge that is honest, a judge that acts with integrity, he would have then hauled Ramaphosa over the coals for perjury, as it were, because basically he said something which is not true under oath, but he just gets left to do this. That was the one thing. The other thing, in that commission, there was a discussion there about the issue of oath of office versus the party line. Ramaphosa proudly said there, in front of the highest judge in the land, that I'm an organizational man. You must remember that when people go to parliament, they don't take themselves there, they get deployed. So the party line is very important. He said everything to justify that. Now, the oath of office of a president and any member of parliament is not a member of parliament, but it's got an oath of office not too dissimilar to the oath of office of members of parliament. Members of parliament sign an oath to pledge their loyalty to the country and to the constitution of this country, not to their party. Now, if you are going to have a head of state that's going to go there and defend a party line in front of the highest judge in the land and gets and he's allowed to get away with this, what does that say? It means this judge is not doing what he's supposed to be doing, to be the guardians of this constitution. He's there to interpret the constitution. The constitution is very clear that the oath of office enjoins you to support the constitution, enjoins you to support and defend the country. Nothing in the constitution says push your party line. And there you have the head of state pushing the party line in front of the highest judge, and he gets away with it. This is what tells us that this judge was less than equal to the task. And it goes further. In writing this report, he goes and dabbles into politics. These are the two things that I'm going to mention here that we are raising as objections, which we are taking, which the legal team of President Zuma are taking to the JSC. The one thing is the issue of dabbling into politics on a number of ways. The first thing is that he now goes, Judge Zondo, to interfere with the outcome of the NASREC elections, and he talks about how great this was that Ramaphosa won. I mean, Ramaphosa had a particular faction there. So basically, he went into the factional politics of the ANC. Then he says that if it was not him, the public place would have been raided. In fact, I'm surprised that Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma has not actually up to this stage lodged an objection or something, because basically what this is saying Nkosazana Zuma, if she had taken over, she would have raided the public purse in National Treasury and all of that. What an insult to her integrity and all of that. I don't know why, by the way, she has still not dealt with this. I would have dealt with it if I was her. But be that as it may, here you have a judge that is busy fiddling with the party factional issues of the ANC. Why did the judge do this? And the legal team of President Zuma will argue that Justice Mogoeng was punished for interfering or for pronouncing, rightly or wrongly, he was told that him talking about involving himself in politics is wrong in terms of this and that in the ethics verse and chapter was quoted, and he was dealt with. So we think Zondo should suffer the same consequences of dabbling into politics. And he goes further. He said he didn't have time. He's been asking for all kinds of extensions, but then he finds time to also talk to the issue of who should be the politician, who should be the president, rather, that it must be directly elected by the people. There is no submission in that commission that allowed him to stray into that space. Just that the man just loves politics. He strays into that, and in fact, already he got some political reaction. The EFF didn't skip a bit to deal with that. Why is Zondo saying this? They are a political party. They have a right to have the president from their party. Why is Zondo now saying the party must be directly elected when they, the EFF, are there and they think that they can do this? So basically, he's starting a political brawl, which was totally unnecessary. Why did Zondo get himself so entangled into the political affairs of the country when he's a judge? So that's the one thing. The second thing is that the issue of the parole of President Zuma is pending before the courts. On the 15th of August, the case is sitting. Why did Zondo find it appropriate to put in his report that the parole was under questionable circumstances? Why did he do this? So for us as a foundation, with President Zuma, we are saying basically what Zondo was doing here, he was sending a coded message to the Supreme Court of Appeal that me, as the highest judge in the land, I already think that this parole was under questionable circumstances. So, in fact, as we go to that 15th of August, we are not so sure whether it's even worth going there, because the judges, they've been given the line of march by the highest judge in the land. So for those two reasons, His Excellency President Zuma is taking Judge Zondo to the JSC to challenge or to raise the issue of the conduct. And both these instances are listed as part of the thing in the code of ethics of judges, that a judge should not do this. I'm not going to read the actual verse and chapter of it, but it's there, trust me. And I ask Paul to talk to it when it comes in, but they are there, those specific sections within the codes. Lastly, for us again, as the foundation, we're working on this already to even challenge the appointment of Zondo. We hold the view that his appointment to Chief Justice was in itself an unlawful issue. It was unlawful, it was illegal, because we have now been told, you must remember that when courts pronounce becomes law, the courts of this country have pronounced that there's no such a thing as prerogative here. And we know this during the President Zuma era. When he was appointing and dismissing ministers, they took him to court and all of that. And courts have pronounced on this matter. A DA had taken him there and all of that. So courts are clear on this matter that President Zuma cannot just hire and fire and so on. Everything must be rational and all of that. That is our constitutional democracy and all of that. So therefore, if a president does not have prerogative, Ramaphosa then cannot have a prerogative. Now you have a situation here where the constitution is very clear about how a chief justice is appointed. One of the things is that the JSC must be consulted. This is not a nice to have. It doesn't say they must be informed. It doesn't say they must be, I don't know, just, it's very clear they must be consulted. Now, what does it mean to be consulted? Now, if you look at how the JSC is constituted, a very formidable body made up of judges, made up of advocates, made up of attorneys, made up of leaders of political parties, a very formidable group. They sit there and they do a very formidable job. They rank people and all of that. Zondo get ranked last. He was actually the number last in that ranking. After all those votes, I hear that he only got 2 votes out of everything else. So everybody that was there, looking at his submission objectively, came to a conclusion that he's not fit to be the Chief Justice of this country. But Ramaphosa goes and just picks the weakest link and makes him the Chief Justice. So we're challenging that appointment is unlawful because it is irrational. There's nothing rational about appointing number last in the group. Absolutely nothing rational about that. So yeah, we'll be taking that because we think his appointment even to being Chief Justice is actually irrational. So those are all the things. I'm going to stop there. But just safe to say, all of these things are actually some of the things that President Zuma is being oppressed with. I mean, lastly, we even have issues in Pietermaritzburg of the, what do you call this thing, of the arms deal. And in short, we're happy now that finally that we'll be able now, President Zuma will be able now to prosecute Downer in that process. Because how can it be just to show that the system is stacked up against President Zuma? The history of Downer, being ostensibly against President Zuma is well documented. I mean, in a case where the DA was challenging President Zuma and all of that, Downer himself was there to side with made all kinds of affidavits to side with the DA and all of that for Zuma's reinstatement of the charges and all of that. So even though the NPA itself was sort of saying maybe not, but Downer, which just shows that the man had a personal vendetta. In the spy tapes, he is there in the spy tapes making all kinds of pronouncements that create a very clear impression that the man has got an axe to grind. And as if that was not enough, as of now, the very last thing is for him to leak information to media about President Zuma's health and all of that. And even if you leave the health issues out of it, the fact that you have a prosecutor in the NPA that decides to take information that is in the private space of the NPA and share it with other people, that is unlawful in terms of the NPA Act. So we're sitting here with a rogue prosecutor that is being forced onto a case of President Zuma to prosecute President Zuma. And President Zuma, even there, he is saying, I don't mind to deal with NPA. Give me a prosecutor that hasn't got this kind of a dirty history. But the NPA refuses. And they also just want to deal with Zuma with a prosecutor whose hands are so dirty. And the point we've been making is one that says, does it mean there is no other prosecutor in this country? Why is it that we're given a prosecutor that has got such dirty hands? You know, so in the end, what we have here, Comrade Carl, as I hand the mic over to you, we have a system that seems to have decidedly taken a position, taken a view that whenever something has got to do with President Zuma, everything must be done to really suffocate him, to deal with him, to deny him the most basic of the human rights and all that. So indeed, it's quite a shame, as it were. And I must also say that it is a shame also, even with some of his comrades in 2018, who were there in that NEC, fatal NEC that was there, that said the whole night, that there's a lot that those comrades could have done there to prevent the calamity that happened after that NEC, but they were not there for President Zuma. So he is being, he has been, what to call it, dealt a serious blow, first and foremost, by his own comrades, and which is quite a shame. And also he's been dealt he's continuously being dealt a negative and a wrong hand by the system, as it were. But we soldier on. Comrade Carl, I hand back to you.
Thank you, Comrade Mzwanele. And I'm glad that you raised the issue of what happened at that fateful long National Executive Committee meeting in 2018, because some of those members of the National Executive who have been made by President Zuma, who have been given senior appointments, betrayed him, and we need to say it unequivocally. And those people who are still members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC today, and in fact today are going much further in selling their souls out for money, nothing else but for money, to Cyril Ramaphosa, should hang their heads in shame. I'm also glad that you referred, Comrade Mzwanele, about the issues regarding Zondo and his biasness. I was present in that 3-day appearance that President Zuma had in front of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. And the biasness and sometimes the hardly covered up aggressiveness of Mr. Justice Zondo towards President Zuma was extraordinary. President Zuma was perfectly within his rights to complain that Mr. Justice Zondo is biased and cannot preside in a proper manner over the hearings and over this commission with regard to himself. And you're right to say that a lot of what we see in terms of how the legal system operates with regards to President Zuma is entirely unfair. I'm reminded of an interview that the former public protector, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, had with the SABC, where she openly, unashamedly acknowledged that first and foremost, the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture was set up to deal with President Zuma. I suggest that all of us, and I will find that particular recording, it is still there on YouTube, and I'll play it at some stage also here on these Twitter spaces, and also post it on my Twitter page, that we go back and listen to how she unashamedly says the commission was set up first and foremost to deal with President Zuma. Now, this is biasness, and Zondo and President Ramaphosa are beholden to each other. Zondo was already issuing parts of the commission report when he was still waiting to be appointed as Chief Justice. Now, can we expect from Zondo to be objective, to deal properly with President Cyril Ramaphosa when he's waiting for President Ramaphosa to appoint him as Chief Justice, and then end up, as Comrade Mzwanele says, being appointed as number last in terms of his assessment by the JSC, and yet President Ramaphosa appoints him. And on the other hand, President Ramaphosa appointing Zondo because he knows that to some extent, in fact, to a large extent, his fate is in the hands of Zondo. That if Zondo makes certain rulings with regards to his own conduct, it will seriously impact on his future. So what we had here was one hand washing the other. And at the end of the day, all of us and the judicial, the legal system in South Africa ended up getting the short end of the stick, and all of us are the poor. I'm now handing over to Paul Ngobeni, who is our next guest. And Paul, as I hand the mic over to you, I remember how you and I had been dealing with some of these issues around the persecution of President Zuma for almost 2 decades. We've been dealing with some of these issues and engaging about them right from the beginning. So Paul has got a long history of knowledge and understanding of all the matters with regards to President Zuma and the totally unjust manner in which he had been treated over more than 2 decades. I hand the mic over to you, Paul.
Good evening, Comrade Mpangazita, and your invited guests and your listeners. Can you hear me to start with?
We hear you loud and clear, Paul.
Okay. Now, I have written about every aspect of President Zuma's case for, as you correctly said, close to 2 decades now. But I remember very distinctly an article that I wrote in 2008 in January that for the longest time was on the Communist Party website until it was removed for some unexplained reasons. And in that article, I pointed out some of the very fundamental errors that were being made in President Jacob Zuma's persecution, not prosecution. Why persecution? Let me not stray too far from Section 35 of our Constitution. That section of the Constitution guarantees every accused a fair and expeditious trial. Expeditious means speedy and within reasonable time. The first question you need to ask then to yourself is, has President Zuma's rights in that regard, just on the question of fair and expeditious trial, have those rights been respected? Well, let me give you the facts, and then you determine for yourself whether they have been. 2003, in March, Mr. Bulelani Nguga, who was the NPA chief at that time, announces publicly that President Zuma was a guilty man walking, that there was a prima facie case against him. But even though there was a prima facie case, he will not prosecute him at that time. So that means he gave himself the right to pronounce a citizen guilty of a criminal offense, but at the same time tell the world that I'm not going to prosecute him, but I'm going to pronounce that he has a case to answer. 3 years later, so they used the Schabir Shaik trial to put President Zuma on trial by proxy. In other words, they tell a story about him through Schabir Shaik. When Schabir Shaik is convicted, almost 3 years later, they come back and they charge President Zuma. Something happens that is very bizarre at that time. President Mbeki at that time announces, even before the NPA has brought charges against President Zuma, then Deputy President Zuma, he announces that I'm going to remove him from this position. He will have to answer for himself in the courts. Now, at that time, if you don't know whether the person is or is not going to be charged, how do you then remove them from a position and then announce that they will have a case to answer in the courts? He does something even more despicable, which most ANC members like to forget about things, and they pretend that things that matter constitutionally do not matter to them. What he does, he also appoints the prosecutor's wife, the chief prosecutor's wife, to take the position of then Deputy President Zuma. So you have added an incentive into the prosecutor's house or in his household. You announce that this person is going to be the accused. You give the wife of the prosecutor the position, most powerful position of deputy president that you have just taken away from the potential accused. And then after these guys brought the case against President Zuma, they could not get it together. They kept floundering, moving as the late Justice Mzwanele described it. The case moved from one disaster to another until the court struck it off the roll because of the dilatory nature of the delays upon delays that were piled upon the case by then prosecution. They don't pursue the case after it struck off the roll. They wait until the Polokwane elective conference, because they had thought they'd finished President Zuma at that time politically. He wasn't finished. There was an outpouring of support from people who recognized the injustice involved in the whole thing. He goes to Polokwane and clobbers Mbeki. He wins. Mbeki made himself available for a third term as ANC president, even though he knew he could not have a third term as a country's president. But he was defeated. By whom? By President Jacob Zuma. Within a week after the Polokwane conference, they brought another charge now, brought another case, same charges, basically just use the same template, bring a case against them, and they file it in the courts. That is the case that Judge Nicholson, if you remember, Judge Nicholson in 2018, around September, threw out that case too, on the basis of political bias. Now, when you introduce political bias, political abuse, you abuse the process. It's not prosecution, it's persecution, because you are misusing the legal process to get even with someone for political reasons, for ulterior purposes. You no longer seek to serve the end of justice. You actually seek to defeat the ends of justice, make it appear as if you are bringing the person to justice, when you are in fact exacting revenge, or you are acting out of ulterior purposes to either destroy the person politically or otherwise. Then after Judge Nicholson's judgment was overturned by the Supreme Court of Appeal, by the
Paul, You have disappeared.
Miss?
Paul, I don't know, there's a bit of a problem.
Announces that he tapes, what are commonly referred to as the spy tapes, surface. And I think every South African who cares about democracy, I don't care about these people who came in to say they're defending democracy and all of it. Any South African who cares about the Constitution and democracy should be ashamed of themselves just for having had a situation where senior government officials, including ministers, Kazrils, the former prosecutors, Nguga, who had resigned, but was being brought back in to influence how the case against President Zuma should proceed. Nowhere in the world would you be allowed as a former prosecutor to come in and direct your successors about how to prosecute a case and what strategies they should employ to weaken the person politically and all of that. But in our country, it was done. And all of these people will continue telling you that, no, cases against President Zuma are about the rule of law. They're not about the rule of law. But the long and short of it is that that case was dismissed, was withdrawn by Mshe upon listening to the despicable plots, intrigues, the conspiracies, where these guys were saying, you know, we need to get this Zulu boy. We need to make sure that we bring. We charge him. I say we charge him before the Polokwane conference. The idea was that that will weaken him politically. I say we charge him now. And the person saying, I say we charge him now, is not even, does not have any constitutional powers, does not have a right to even speak to a prosecutor because he's a former prosecutor who's out of the system. But that was allowed because it was President Zuma. After the NPA withdrew its charge, its case, somehow the DA, in cahoots with the judiciary, found a way to say by 2017 that that case now needs to be revived. Now, stop right there and ask yourself, what happened to the constitutional guarantee of an expeditious, that is speedy, and fair trial? Would you say between 2003, when the pronouncement about a prima facie case were made, and 2017, that President Zuma got a fair and expeditious trial? You need to be insane to think that a lapse of 15 years after a person has been announced as a guilty man walking, that somehow it's fair to bring that person, to resuscitate charges against that person and claim you're doing it under the, in the interest of the rule of law. There was no such thing. The violation was that clear. And it's the so-called prosecution, the arms deal prosecution that we're talking about now is nothing short of a persecution. It's a politically motivated vendetta. I don't think even the people who are pursuing it now realistically believe that they are going to get any conviction. But they are pushing it to simply assist the so-called successor regime to vanquish, to defeat their political enemies, ideological enemies within the same ANC. So the trial, the case itself is being kept alive on stilts, on artificial grounds. It's not a case that's grounded in facts and law. Why am I saying that? you had the Siriti Commission. The Siriti Commission heard the entire gamut of the evidence that these prosecutors claim to have against Jacob Zuma. Every witness that testified in the Shabir Sheikh case, with few exceptions, testified before the Siriti Commission. Persons who claim to have this powerful evidence that will sink Jacob Zuma, when they were brought to a hearing, amongst them Patricia De Leo, they admitted that the information they had was based on nothing more than hearsay. They could not substantiate one of the things that they were talking about. And what happened after the Siriti Commission found that the whole thing was nonsense, what did President Ramaphosa do? When someone brought the Siriti Commission on judicial review, what the Ramaphosa administration did was they withdrew their opposition to that case, because they knew that that case was actually helping President Zuma. In an era where these guys claim that the rule of law requires that they should respect the findings of commissions and all of that, they created an exception when it came to the Siriti Commission. Go read the judgment that set aside the Siriti Commission. The judges themselves in there, I've written about that recently. Judge Mlambo went out of the Gauteng High Court and he recruited judge presidents from 2 other provinces, sat with them, then wrote a judgment in which he acknowledged that the executive basically is not opposing the reviewing and setting aside the commission. Now, commissions are costly. They cost a lot of money. You would have thought that before a judge, particularly a judge president, accept that kind of nonsense, that there is no opposition from the executive, he would have asked pertinent questions. So we spend all this money to go through all this evidence, to have a commission produce a report that you are now saying you are not even going to defend. That had nothing to do with whether President Zuma was guilty or not, whether there was any evidence, because the Siriti Commission found there was no evidence. But the whole idea was that if you want to weaken President Zuma politically, you need to make sure that you tell the story through the judiciary. That is where Ramaphosa's capture of the judiciary, his collaboration and collusion with the judiciary, picked up speed. From there, my brother Mzwanele has already spoken about what happened when President Zuma took the issue of Madonsela's report on review. I'm not going to rehash that, but what that also tells you, don't focus on what the judgment says. Focus on what Ramaphosa did. Because even then, when he knew there was an appeal against that judgment, because the legal issue there, constitutional issue, very serious, fundamental constitutional issue, was whether Section 84, which gives the president an exclusive right to appoint a commission, can then be farmed out to the judiciary and allow the judiciary exercise what is essentially an executive function. Nowhere in the world is that allowed. I've written again about this. Commissions of inquiry are tools of the executive. They are policy-making tools for the executive. They can never be usurped by the judiciary. The judiciary can never insinuate itself into commissions of inquiry, whether you're talking about appointment of a commissioner or whether you're talking about the terms of reference for a commissioner. the judiciary is supposed, that is the separation of powers principle that requires that that distinction be maintained. In President Zuma's case, the way they dealt with it was to say, well, let's deny funding. Let's withdraw the appeal because we can. We have a right to now that he's no longer president. And let's deny him funding to continue fighting. Then they went to a court to say that even the normal agreement that was accorded to all public servants, the idea that the state attorney will represent you or that the state will pay for your costs in litigation, they decided that when it came to Jacob Zuma, that was not to be applied. I can go on and on about the wrongs and the injustices visited upon President Zuma. You can write volumes and volumes of books on that. But the few things I would like to say, and then maybe people may ask questions later on if they feel like asking questions. The issue of Justice Zondo and how he dealt with the President Jacob Zuma's incarceration or his appearance before the commission. I think you only need to read the dissenting judgment of Justice Jafta and Justice Throne, where they make it very clear that President Zuma was singled out for unfair treatment, unprecedented. He was singled out for conviction and incarceration, prison sentence without a trial. That is what makes people angry. That's why people burn. And they have not burned enough. I think they're going to burn some more. People don't accept injustice that hits them in the face, and you expect them to simply say, it's all well and good. They can see when they are being cheated. They can see when someone is being denied justice in broad daylight, robbed of justice in broad daylight. What happened to President Zuma has never happened in any democratic country. And as those dissenting justices pointed out, incarceration of someone without a trial, without affording them a fair trial, is the exact opposite of the rule of law. You can't argue it any other way. But in addition, the incarceration without a trial was based on nothing more than doing Zondo a favor. It has nothing to do with the rule of law. The rule of law says commissions, the Commissions Act, 1947, it's been on the books since the time of apartheid. We haven't repealed it, we are still using it. It says a person who fails to obey a subpoena to appear before a commission can be referred to a magistrate court and be put on trial. The maximum sentence you can get on that is about 6 months. That's how the former president, P.W. Botha, when he refused to appear before the TRC, he was taken to a magistrate court, not to the constitutional court. Now, when it comes to President Zuma, they tell you that they give him almost close to 2 years incarceration. Based on what statute, what law says that failure to appear before a commission can fetch you 2 years in prison? One that they made up. And the other thing I want to make, I've written about this again. Justice Kampepe says something that actually emphasizes how President Zuma has been deliberately, systematically targeted for unfair discrimination and persecution. She says that as they were writing the judgment, or as they were dealing with the Zuma case, they received death threats. Now, that is the most serious. For a judge who's hearing a case to receive death threats, that means that judge can no longer claim to be deciding the case without fear or favor. You've received death threats, but interestingly, she does not disclose those death threats to President Zuma's lawyers. She does not disclose those death threats to the commission's lawyers. I even doubt whether she disclosed them to her colleagues, because something will have been said about it in the judgment. So how many of us would like to appear before a judge and know that the judge already has an attitude towards against you, but doesn't want to tell you what the source of that adverse or negative attitude is, because the judge has already received death threats, which they are attributing to you falsely? I mean, that's how low, that is how far our judiciary has sunk and degenerated. So I think maybe if I've taken too long, you will just stop me. You just stop me, because I have some ideas that I just wanted to make sure that I impart while they're still fresh in my mind.
Please proceed, Paul.
Now, you tell me, how many of us would like to go into a trial where you stand the risk, you're at the risk of having a 2-year sentence imposed on you, effective incarceration, and know that the judge, or only to be told after the judge retires that, yeah, as I was writing your judgment, I had received death threats that I kept secret. I didn't want to tell you about. The judge was influenced then. It means that they did not render an impartial judgment free of external influences. And then you are going to tell me that the imprisonment, the conviction of President Jacob Zuma was based on the rule of law and an impartial judiciary. Nonsense. There's no such thing. We need to be honest with ourselves and stop lying to ourselves about things. And the last thing I would say, and I would want to be very clear on this, that we are dealing with, I know some of you are hardcore ANC loyalists and members. I respect you all for that, but I think you need to come to reality. You need to confront the fact that the ANC of Oliver Tambo, of Chris Hani, of even Nelson Mandela is gone. What you have is now a bunch of incompetents. People who, even when they have power, they don't know how to use it. I have written previously about the fact that the issue of parole for President Zuma, parole is never a judicial decision. It's an executive decision. The judiciary imposes a sentence, sends a person to the prison. But the question of whether that person should get parole now or later lies with the executive. And that is where Arthur Fraser was correct. You can say all the nasty things you want to say about him, former chief spy, this and this. You can say all the things you want. But he was correct because he understands the Constitution. You grant, as the executive, you grant parole. The judiciary does not grant people parole. But in the case of President Zuma, what do? They say, we are setting aside the decision to grant him parole, and even the time that he was let out should not count. So he needs to go and start serving a sentence afresh. What kind of rubbish is that? First of all, President Zuma did not grant himself parole. So even assuming Fraser was wrong in granting him parole, why should President Zuma be punished by being denied credit. Because even as he's on parole now, he's still serving a sentence. That is why Mpangazita, the correctional services guys told you that no, we are not even allowing him to come and address anyone. Why would they say that if he was not serving his prison sentence? He is still under correctional supervision. So how does a judge, unless that judge is sick to the core, how does a judge say, because they let him out at that time, I'm going to deny him even the time that he's out now shouldn't even count, even though effectively the former president is still under correctional supervision. You, Mpangazita, just told us, as you were studying tonight, that the correctional services people told you that he couldn't participate because the conditions of his parole don't allow him to do that. So the anti-Zuma, the hatred is being carried out within the judiciary, in the highest echelons of government, in the executive. That is why you have, and I mentioned this thing about the ANC failing to use power or being stupid not to even recognize how power is used. President Zuma should have been granted pardon. And I will still say, if you had a president who had gumption, who had guts, he will grant him a pardon. He can grant a pardon anytime. That will not be to benefit Zuma individually, but to recognize that the divisions, the hatred, and the animosity that has been unleashed because of the injustice against President Zuma is threatening to tear this country apart. You can listen to the nonsense that the DA and others will tell you about, that this is rule of law. They can say that because none of the people who died last year were white people. They can say that. As long as only black people die, let it happen. We would rather have the rule of law prevail over, we don't care how many thousands of people die. But the truth of the matter is that pardons, if you look at pardons, even in our own country, what were the amnesties, the TRC amnesties about? Where killers, the de Kooks and others, will go and throw hand grenades and all kinds of weapons in family homes, kill everything that's alive in that, including parents and grandparents and all of that. We made a decision that for the sake of peace, we could grant a pardon. Why can't we, looking at the potential for very serious, because this thing, don't think it happened only last year and it's over. It's not over. Only a stupid person would think it's over because it's a powder keg in the sense that, yes, there are all the simmering grievances, but they are exacerbated now more by what people perceive to be a serious corruption perpetrated by the likes of President Ramaphosa. Somebody having $4 million that he has not accounted for, committing crimes in the process of protecting that $4 million US dollars. And when asked to account, he talks about due processes. Oh, the matter is still under investigation. He avoids and avoids and avoids. Now, let me say something. Let me tell you that unless we end the persecution of President Jacob Zuma, we are sowing the seeds of a very serious, deadly strife in this country that will last for years, not for days, last for years. Because people are not stupid. People recognize that when you perpetrate an injustice against an individual, and you do it so blatantly, you abandon all pretenses of legal procedures. You simply say, I am going to do it because I can. Not because it's just, not because it must be done. I'm doing it because I can. You have a president who comes up after seeing the very serious uprising from last year. He says this is an ethnically based, it's a Zulu-based thing, according to him. So the man who fought for all our freedom, who fought to free us all, regardless of whether you are Zulu, Shangaan, or Swati, or whatever, he fought to free us all. Today, his successor, fellow ANC member, characterizes the people's anger over an injustice as simply a Zulu phenomenon. And you expect people to accept that. Anyway, I'm gonna stop, but I simply want to say that there's not an aspect of the Zuma case I have not written about. The only thing I probably haven't written about is the so-called Zondo Commission report, which I think I agree with what Mzwanele said. I think it's nonsensical. It's nonsensical in every aspect of it that deals with President Zuma. It's nonsensical to the extent that it says that you gave a very good example about where Ramaphosa says that he recommended that Molefe be appointed. Now, if you are saying Ramaphosa was not involved with the Guptas, but you are saying Molefe's appointment was due to the Gupta influence, are you saying that Ramaphosa was a pawn of the Guptas? Why not say so directly then? Because he's come forward and says, in my official capacity, uninfluenced by the Guptas, without being recruited or influenced by them, I recommend that Molefe should be the CEO at ESCOM. But for the purpose of writing a political narrative against President Zuma, you're saying now Molefe's appointment was due to the Guptas and Zuma was all in charge of it. I mean, look, let's stop nonsense. We need to start dealing with things. Let's not couch them in legalese. It will be easy for me to couch all these things in legalese, but let's stop. We need to start dealing with these things as facts and deal with them factually, expose them for what they are. And I think if you ask me, President Zuma has been the most persecuted person. I don't think President Zuma will ever get justice in this country. You have a judiciary that has been shown to be very corrupt. If you had talked to me maybe 5 years ago, I'll have said, yeah, there's a chance you might have a different judge who can still deal with the matter. But right now, I can tell you, anytime Jacob Zuma appears in any court, even if it was to be over a speeding ticket, traffic fine, chances are he will not get a fair trial in that court. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for that very extensive input. I want to touch on two things before we open for participation of those who've requested to speak. The one is your remarks about the hatred against President Zuma. If one reads the judgment by Justice Sisi Kampepe, it is the most intemperate, strongly worded judgment I've ever seen. It is filled with hatred over and above the very dubious implementation of the law. Secondly, I want to talk about this issue of the African National Congress and what you said, Paul, that the ANC in many ways seems to have been lost to all of us. And I want to give the example of what I experienced this morning. A couple of months ago, I was charged to appear in front of the National Disciplinary Committee of the ANC. Paul, can you just mute your mic? There's sounds coming through it. I was charged to appear in front of the National Disciplinary Committee of the African National Congress on the basis of the remarks that I made at President Zuma's residence at Nkandla on the 4th of July and subsequently also on the 8th of July, on that fateful day when I was arrested while I was doing a live interview on SABC TV. And basically, the charges that were brought against me were that I had said that the judiciary has proved not to be independent and that they are biased against President Zuma, and that the judiciary had been used as a selective tool of attack by factional politicians against President Zuma. Then there was the strong statement that had been made by Minister Lindiwe Sisulu about our judiciary. And interestingly enough, the chairperson of the African National Congress, Gwede Mantashe, when asked if he thinks that Lindiwe Sisulu had overstepped the mark, said no, she had not done so. She had the right to make those comments. My lawyer, Matthews Posa, then approached the National Disciplinary Committee of the ANC and said, how do you intend to charge Carl Niehaus with those strange charges that you bring when at the same time your chairperson says that there's nothing wrong with expressing these concerns about the conduct of the judiciary and what many of our judicial officers are doing. 2:30 that morning, in the middle of the night, before my disciplinary case had to start, the then acting chairperson of the National Disciplinary Committee phoned Matthews Posa and said, we are postponing the case sine die. Now, subsequently, the National Executive Committee of the ANC decided to reconfigure. The National Executive Committee decided to reconfigure the National Disciplinary Committee. And for the first time in the history of the ANC, they have decided to include now a number of persons who are not members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC in the National Disciplinary Committee. You will recall that on Monday, my case was thrown out of the Escort Magistrates Court, the COVID-19 case. Now that there's a new National Disciplinary Committee loaded with those who are Ramaphosa acolytes, suddenly this morning I receive a letter that my case, with regards to the remarks that I made that the judiciary are biased and are acting in a biased manner against President Zuma, is being reinstituted. And that coming Saturday, the 9th of July, I'm once again being charged in front of the National Disciplinary Committee of the ANC. Now, this is the kind of things that happens with various people. And this is the kind of actions by the ANC that makes many of us who are loyal African National Congress members believe that the ANC has lost its moral compass, that it is no longer capable in its current leadership in terms of President Cyril Ramaphosa and the current National Executive Committee to lead this country, and is compromising our society fundamentally. So, Paul, thank you for those inputs, and thank you also for raising that serious concern about the manner in which the African National Congress, as what should be the leader of society and national liberation movement, fails to execute its duties and is in a very fundamental way compromising our judicial system and, in fact, our overall democratic society and also the constitutional democracy that we have in South Africa. I'm now going to go to a number of people who've requested to speak, and we will give you the opportunity to either make your inputs or ask questions as Paul suggested. And after that, I will then come back to Mzwanele, Manyi, and Paul Ngobeni and allow them the opportunity to give responses to your comments. The first person that I'm going to give the mic to is Harold. Harold, the mic is yours.
Good evening, Carl. Thank you for the opportunity. It seems that you always give me the first opportunity, which I'm really humbled, and to follow the wonderful speakers you have, guests you have here to speak about the topic here about President Zuma's persecution. And yes, it is a persecution because, and the reason why is that he stands at the top of something that I think, if you are astute observer of the history of the ANC, and I have to make a disclosure that I do not have any love for the ANC at all, because I believe they are gatekeeping, organization for the true movement and liberation that lies within the nation itself. But however, if you look at what President Zuma and all those that have been persecuted and targeted for years and decades here, and is that they are those that were forged and represented the spear of the nation, that they have association with Nkoti Sizwe and the MK. Now, if you look at everyone right across from ICE and everyone, yourself, even, like, why is it that it's all of them, and yet the UDF and the union guys, the COSATU, who forms the Tri-Alliance, seems to be the ones that are busy pushing the persecution in a way within your house, which you call the ANC. Because, and this is very peculiar for me, in the sense that that I know that why you would target those that are out of the others, which ended up being merchants and lovers of coin. Yet those that are the warriors would not profane themselves in that manner, because there's a code that represents, that they live by, that they place their whole existence upon, that they would not be those that would possibly want to sell it out for a mere few coins. So therefore, that seems to be almost ironic that the very thing that these men were would live by, somebody like Chris Hani, that they would want to every day emulating him, that to be standing as a righteous man, that would say truth, because and serve. That is what a warrior is. He serves the nation, he serves his community, he serves his family. That is what, and all of us as Africans, we know this is it's an inherent, almost intuitive thing, and it's only through the circumstances of which we live in that we have to deny it and push it back and become a consumer, an employee, a worker, a debt slave, and push that deep down and say, no, that is something that the colonialists just rid of us, and there's no value anymore. And the thing is, I look and analyzing, I'm thinking, and I'm looking at all these characters within the ANC that have also been able to get themselves into a public office and into the administrations over the decades since the New South Africa. And they all from UDF and all these backgrounds, and they found themselves into the CODESA, like for instance, the Transitional Executive Committee of Finance, which that cabal, and I will refer it to a cabal, have never been at any time far away from the Treasury and the Reserve Bank or the governor position, from Tito, from Pravin, from Trevor Manuel, Maria Ramos, Thabo Mbeki, who headed it, Nene, I believe that, and Nene and Jonas were scribes for that committee as young men. So I look at this team and I'm thinking that they've never, and the times when the script of taking somebody else out of that, from Mr. Van Rooyen, one of the most highly qualified finance ministers that we could possibly have had, almost caused the collapse of the country. So these men, somehow they and yes, Jill Marcus as well. Why is it that they always have been around, and also they have been links in UDF? And the UDF, it was almost like it was a joke in front of our faces, right in front of us, the United Democratic Front. And everybody, and there was great characters there. Alan Busak, we know, but why was he the one? It was almost like when the UDF has been integrated into the ANC and we move into the future, that he's suddenly found to be corrupt and had to be imprisoned. And we know what is as a fundamental task within the ANC. Any card-carrying ANC member is that he must find money for the party. He must have gatherings where people donate to the party. That is what you do. You're almost like a Scientologist organization where you have to find like a pyramid scheme. We know this. I've been invited to these things where your contribution in any form has to be made for the health and the well-being of the party. So that is what probably Alan Bushak probably did, is that because he was such was able to, money was coming towards him that he would have to support the party financially. And he maybe thought that maybe I should just keep a bit of some of my side. You know, he did blame it on, put it on to his accountant, which they tend to be, because we've heard of how the accounting firms are probably the most sneakiest and dirtiest around. However, what I'm trying to say is that the UDF, I mean, there's nothing united but democratic. By its nature, democracy is a divisive, it forms a pole. That there's two sides within it. So how are you united democratically? And then you are front for it. So the name was even there that it's maybe possibly a creation, a third force creation, in the sense that it was able to infiltrate using the ANC's itself for the legitimacy. Yet these are the same people that seem to be now the champions of industry and heading our tax revenue services. All of them seem to have been quite successful, right up to Rothschilds. How is that possible? So and the unions, and seem to also that these ones are speaking about, and they're always speaking against those, because they are the merchants, they are the workers, they quarreled with the champions of industry. Yet the true warriors of the movement are the ones that are vilified, that must be put in prison. And I include the APLA comrades, the outsiders that were resolute, that were willing to put blood on their hands for our liberation. Yet they are still not seen the light of day. So what I'm calling on those that I've identified, and whoever is in the space and whoever listens to this thing, that you long ago put a vocation on your life to say that I will serve this nation at the pain of death, and you're not even sorting your own house out with the merchants and lovers of coins and the Askaris and the MPPs that are just, how can I say, they're moving around like roaring lions, just doing chaos and mayhem where they go to, destroying lives, destroying people. And the ANC is merely just has found itself, was able to integrate itself into the very fabric of South Africa. In the thing. Nothing can happen really without. Yet we do, many of us do reject it. Yet we can't deny that it's embedded itself into this facade idea that we call South Africa. Because let us be clear, we are speaking about the institutions of the Republic, the judiciary, the executive and the legislature, but this is a war happening that is beyond this. And we're talking about oligarchical war. And President Zuma knows what this is about. He sits in Nkandla like he's a shogun. He is. Because he's fighting powerful clans. These people have ruled for 100 years here, and they answer to only one family up there in the Britain, the Rothschilds, the wealthiest people that have ever existed in human history, if not beyond. So what we are seeing ourselves here, we're thinking of this, that load shedding and all these things. These are weapons of war to psychologically break us down. That you don't even have to put boots on the ground to crush us, because we will be begging for relief from the cost of living. But yet you'll see in Holland now, the army is moving because farmers are shutting down airports and stuff, but they know that they have to crush that type of revolution. Nip it in its butt. But us, we use the energy, because that's how oligarchs do. They use pseudo-populism because they don't have access to the mechanisms of the state, of the Republic, to be able to exert pain on us. So they use where they have entry points, which is what we gave them in 94 with the idea of SOEs. Because that was always the idea, the transitions from, for every 30 years, is how the Oppenheimers, on the behest of the Rothschild, to move us to a long-term goal of what we all know what is happening. That is there's been an escalation to a one world order, a one world government, and the fact that states, all nation states, must be just destroyed, and that we will beg for a central government in the form of a one world government. So yes, this is what's happening. War is being waged on us, and it's hybrid in a sense. Psychologically, a battle is, if anyone knows the art of war, a war is won before the battle is fought, and this is where we in that space. We hearing rumor. I mean, things. We live in a time of disinformation and fake news, and yes, but truth is right amongst it. Truth is right in between. When we hear of letters going to NATO, and we you privileged us with the Russian ambassador to speak to us about the situation in the Ukraine. But if you hear the words of President Putin, and I'm sure that the sentiment would be shared by President Zuma, that this is far greater than we think. So yes, we are burdened by bread and butter issues, really like how to keep warm. But we need to elevate ourselves higher to say there's something coming, and that our domestic squabble of where this idea of South Africa, which is as fast, is slowly being destroyed because they want to usher in something else. But when they're busy destroying, there's opportunity, because it means that it's in the open. The idea, the divine idea of what we want to be as a nation is up for grabs too, and we must claim it. But we must seize it when it comes. And I'm calling on this not to be resolute, and not be cowardly, and not be procrastinate, and to before you go sleep to say, what am I willing to put? What am I willing to sacrifice? Because many that's in the space, from the attorneys, the lawyers here, all of them, they know that they're part of an order. And they literally took a vow. And that vow maybe be for the Republic and the Constitution, but they know inherently what it is to serve the nation, to serve us as African brothers and sisters here on this land that was given to us, that we call our own, where all our ancestors is buried right from the beginning. Because we all would not be staying here if they're not there. That bled for the soil. They tilled the soil. They fed their families and their cattle and everything through time, since time immemorial. And we've been plundered for God knows how long. And now we need to say that we speak about the land and we want to use these mechanisms. That constitution was written by foreign people. We know this. We know this. They boast about it on their Harvard CVs, saying that they were personal constitutional consultants. Lawrence Tribe, a constitutional academic from Harvard, I confronted him on Twitter. I said, who else besides you as a esteemed constitutionalist from the US was involved in from the creation of our constitution? Because my view of the constitution, it's merely elaborate legal encryption to keep us trapped in a political labyrinth away from the Reserve Bank. Because the Reserve Bank is not just a financial institution that controls the money, it's literally the nation's storehouse. The very thing that if you go publicly, that Joseph was put in charge of, a foreigner, and he controlled it, and within how many years the Egyptians got disgruntled because they saw who is controlling our money, who's controlling our storehouse.
Harold, Can you slowly begin to wind up, please, so that we give more people an opportunity?
Yes,
Thank you.
definitely, Carl. So yes, I think that the crux was just before that, but that the Constitution, and that's why it can be trampled on by Thuli Modisella, because whether everyone wants to give credence to this report, and I'm telling you, it's void. It's not worth the paper it's written on, because Zondo had no capacity, he had no competence to be the commissioner, because the entire appointment of recommendation and appointment of him was unlawful, wholly unlawful, because the constitutional power that vests in the president, whether it is in the president, him, or if you again, and the fact that Thuli Modisella that said committed legal blasphemy by dividing a constitutional power that can only vest in a single person or office, that the Chief Mogoeng can recommend and President Zuma appoint, then who is delegating to who? Which arm of the government is telling the other what to do? So therefore, thank you, Carl. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold. And I think we all hear the frustration in your voice, the issues that you raise, the lack of constitutionality in the actions of so many people is something which concerns and keeps us awake, many of us, day after day. I'm handing over to Mzwanele, who's requested the mic. Mzwanele, if you have heard that the mic is handed over to you, can you please unmute your mic so that we can hear you? Thank you. There you are.
Hello. Thanks, Carl, for the opportunity. I just have more questions rather than comments, and I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible. I think everyone in this country can see that the Constitution was not made on the premise of Black people. And the fact that it was said that the CODESA negotiations were successful because we avoided a civil war. So that means that those that were in power, the apartheid government, was not repentant. They were not willing to give away power. So we cannot be in a position of negotiating with those people because they didn't want to give this power away. It was because of international pressure and because of the riots, the Umkhonto weSizwe and the people that were fighting that led to the release of Mandela and all the drama, which led to the elections. And I don't want to talk too much about the death of Chris Hani, but I know that he wasn't happy with the document and he was assassinated. That's on the media, that's everywhere. I mean, that's a hornet's nest. That's like a can of worms that no one wants to open. So if a revolutionary like Chris Hani, someone who died, who fought for this country, was unhappy with the document, and then a year later, the document was accepted and everyone was happy. And then today, this very constitution is the same constitution that is being used against Zuma. It is being used to oppress Black people. So when are we going to sit and keep quiet about this constitution?
Sorry, Carl, is it just me you cannot hear?
I beg your pardon?
I was just checking if it's just myself I cannot hear.
So there may be a problem with your mic because I can definitely hear, and I think the rest of us can hear. Perhaps you should just either try to activate it again, perhaps go out, reactivate, and come back. But I can definitely hear what is being said, and I think the rest of us can too. Can anyone else just confirm that you can hear? Yeah, I see people are indicating that they are able to hear. I'm sure Mzwanele will sort it out and he will come back to us. My apologies for that interruption. Please proceed.
Okay, so I'm saying I was just going on about this document, the Constitution, and some people also say that there was not proper consultation processes from the Black people themselves. And this Constitution is oppressing Zuma. And this Constitution is being used against Black people, if you may say, or the marginalized or the oppressed. So how long are we going to let this Constitution stand? So I see we've got Advocate Talimpofu there. I know he knows the law. So how do we challenge a term called the counter-majoritarian dilemma, where the few people have managed to manipulate the government in order to suit their needs, which is what has quite happened here with the white monopoly. These people, they've managed to keep the wealth. I mean, who made the deal with all these people? On whose account were they allowed to keep all the wealth, where all the Black people consulted? I mean, all this power that they have, who gave it to them? You know, is it possible to go back to the CODESA negotiations? I mean, that's just a question. And also, I'm just going to ask about the current president. He's been sidestepping all the issues, and who gives him such power? So when is Parliament going to sit, or who's going to hold him accountable? Because he's just suspended the public protector. The recent one, the acting one, that lady, shame she's new on the job. You can see that she's probably working under instructions. So who's going to hold this current president accountable? Because he's sidestepping, and I feel like the more he's been given leeway, the more problems they're going to be. And coming back to Zuma, I was listening earlier on the fact that, you know, with the unrest last year, and Mzwanele Manyi pointed out that, you know, there was an intelligence report, there was signs. You know, I remember there was a Sunday where people from all over South Africa, they came to Nkandla to try and defend Zuma because they could see that the police were going to come and arrest them. And then the date was changed to Wednesday. That was a clear indicator that, okay, there's going to be turmoil in this country if the people who are in charge, or the law enforcement, or the intelligence officers, they need to be proactive in terms of this July unrest. And it was allowed to happen. And I know there was an investigation, but we haven't heard who's been held accountable. And it's just utter incompetence. So my question is, how long is this going to continue? I mean, it is very frustrating. We want South Africa to be a better country, but under this current administration, under this current document, which is called the Constitution, which is only benefiting benefiting the few. I mean, when are we going to let this slide? Who gives the parliament such power? The current president such power, Ramaphosa, because he's sidestepping everything. And when is he going to be held accountable? He's just avoided the ANC as well to meet with them. And I just want to say one thing as well. I feel like a lot of people have things to say. If we keep our opportunities a bit short, we will allow space for other people. Thank you so much, Carl.
Thank you, but I can't help to smile because you were not particularly short, but that's fine. The point that you make about accountability for President Cyril Ramaphosa is a serious one. Very, very serious and detailed charges have been laid against President Ramaphosa, and yet the South African Police Service and the NPA are dragging their feet. And we must express our concern about what happened with regards to the Deputy Public Protector. A very important set of 32 questions had been sent to President Ramaphosa by the Public Protector. Then the Public Protector was suspended. Now we had to hear from the person who's under investigation, to whom the questions were sent. First, that there is a postponement, further time is given to him in order to answer those questions. And after he had made that announcement, only then does the Deputy Public Protector come in and confirm that case. Surely that was wrong. And surely we are faced with a situation here where there's undue influence on the office of the public protector now. That situation is being abused. And we as a country and as a citizenry have to ask, why is President Ramaphosa not yet charged? The evidence is there. It is overwhelming. He should have been charged long ago. And why has he been given this extension by the Deputy Public Protector? And why does he make the announcement that he's been given that extension? Clearly, there's a lot that is wrong. A lot is rotten, as the old saying goes, in the state of Denmark. I'm handing over to Ronnie, who's requested to speak.
Hello, Comrade Kai. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, Ronnie. You can proceed.
Oh, thank you very much, and everybody else on the space. I'm also going to be quick, so that I get my point across. It looks as if we are in a type of a mafia state. I think that's the only way to describe it. It's a type of mafia state that there is a cartel or a cabal in control of affairs, and this cabal is not a cabal that it's a cabal that goes way back. And we all know who this cartel are. You can't call them white monopoly capital. You can call them the settler barons. So it's quite clear that at the heart of everything that is happening is the resources, the wealth of the country, and they've managed the cartel, the cabal, the settler barons. They've managed to be in control of this wealth for a very long time, and they need to hold on to that wealth. And so there is a psychological war, and unfortunately for Black people, we are at the mercy of white-owned media houses. We are at the mercy of white-owned media houses, and most of the information that we consume come from white-owned media houses. So we are at the mercy of them. And who owns the media controls the information. Who owns the media drive public narrative, public discourse. And so I think we must be aware that if we really, really want to understand what is at play, we must be wary of the media. I think the media is going to plunge this country into a crisis. The media is going to destroy this country. I'm talking about white-owned media houses, because if the media were to interview, let's say, Mr. Manyi or Carl or Ace or anyone else, they have an energy with vigorous questions. But if they were to interview Praveen or any of the other so-called good guys, they it's as if they don't even have energy to ask the same vigorous questions. So let me move on quickly to this Pala Pala incident. I think there hasn't even been any serious allegations against the president post 94 than this Pala Pala. How did the dollars get into this country? That's a very serious question that we must look into. How did it get here? My own take is that it came through one of the private terminals, because we have a private citizen who owns a private terminal. Who knows what is coming in and out of this country through that private terminal? And the president, he goes on, he was in Limpopo and he says, I am a trader, I trade in cows, and so he's actually admitting that yes, there was money. He even goes on to say, is admitting that yes, there was money stolen. And he doesn't deny that it's not US dollars. And so one is wondering, where did these dollars come from? Who trades? Even if you trade, you can't accept US dollars as payment. It's not a legal tender in South Africa. So how did you sold cows and then you collected dollars and then you took it home? How did it? I don't believe that story. But unfortunately, the media, because we are at the mercy of the media, they are trying their best to cover it up in all sorts. So I think these spaces and other spaces is very good, so that you must get to the bottom. In fact, if South Africa if this was a democracy, I don't think he should even be in office if this was a democracy. But be as it may, that's where we are. And I think we must keep on. We must keep on. It's clear. The president is not here for any black person's interest. If you are black and you think he's here for your interest, I think you are seriously mistaken. And then a quick one on ESCOM. ESCOM is being deliberately and intentionally made defunct so that it will be privatized. Deliberately, intentionally is being defunct because that's the standard practice of privatization. Make it defunct, make it not to work, let the public cry out, and then you come in with your so-called solution. But your solution has been the agenda from day one. And so I'm saying ESCOM is being deliberately defunct. Thank you.
Thank you, Roni. And the question you ask about where does the dollars come from is absolutely correct. Evidently, it did not come from the sale of animals at Pala Pala Farm. Evidently, those dollars must have entered the country in an illegal way. We know that the president flies with the presidential plane. We know that presidential plane is not subject to search or the usual processes that goes through custom. So we need to ask the question, did those dollars fly in with the presidential plane? And what were they for? I asked the question the other day, did those dollars perhaps come from the CIA? We are entitled to ask that question. And wherever they came from, and whether they came from handing over to Thabo Masholane. Thabo, the mic is yours.
Amandla, Comrade Carl, and thank you for this opportunity and this platform, Comrade. Comrade Carl, I I've said from this space since you started, and I heard Comrade Jimmy, Comrade Manyi articulate on very, very important matters. And they said what's the word? Reality on this matter is that your problem, Comrade Carl, together with Comrade Manyi, and I can also put Advocate Dali and Advocate Ngobeni as well. You guys have got a problem, and your problem is that you guys showed us the money. I'll tell you the truth. Your problem is that you guys showed us the money. You guys showed us that there is a thing called the justice system. That's why you guys are where you are, and that's why you can even see it in the Course/Ramaphosa media houses. Whenever you or Talimpofu or Julius or Ngobeni or Manyi, whenever any of, oh yeah, even Comrade Tornado, Comrade Tony Ngeni and Mavrin Turks, you guys are a problem, and you guys are the rot that you are not supposed to be in the ANC, because you guys showed us the money. You showed us that no, there is such a thing as empowerment, and that thing came with Umsholozi. You know, I can tell you, I'm one of those people who can stand in any court and say, you know what, under Comrade Jacob Zuma, I got to learn what is it to be an SMME. What is it to be an SMME, an invoice? Remember, there's SMMEs who get into vendor databases, but they never go anywhere. I've been fighting this war in Amalakhen with many comrades here from the days of BHP Billiton. And then they went over to South 32, then they went over to SAYEK, then they went over to, now they're called Siriti. I've been fighting all along. And the problem is one, is that Umsholozi made a mistake of showing the kafirs the money, you see. Because Rupert and all those guys who own them Glencos, it's okay, you know, and we must be honest about this, and we must call a spade what it is. Where now, Comrade Carl, your crime is that there's a term in Afrikaans, and I know you know it very well. It's called a kafir puti. Where now you are a kafir puti, and that's why you're gonna be prosecuted and persecuted. And then on the other side, we have the Slam kafirs, which is Mpofu, Mkhwebane, and all the other ringleaders, Manyi. They come up with ANN7 to show us the other side of the coin, which the Rupert and Koos media, DSTV, was not showing us. Because, you see, growing up, let me just step back a bit. Maybe I'm going too fast for myself, but you know, when I grew up, there's many cadres. My father went to exile. Comrade Carl, my father went to exile. You can check I invite anyone to go check the Home Affairs records. They'll see my father crossed the border in 74. I think he came back in 76, somewhere there. Right. And then many comrades who were in the NEC, I can even go and say, I knew General Spiwenyanda before he even became a general, because they used to sit with my father. And by then it was still ANC people. Many of them, many, not just one, many. They used to sit with my father. And for me, politics wasn't an issue of, you know, I'm reading Twitter or I'm reading what. Today we launched, today there's a region called Ipalule region of the ANC. And I'm proud, and I can proudly say I'm one of the co-founders of Ipalule region. Where you guys were burying branch was Comrade Chief Mlojo, whom today the ANC does not recognize. But that man is the guy who got us and said, young lions, I want you guys to come with me. We go in the streets, we launch the ANC here in the suburbs of Witbank. And we did that under his direction. But today the ANC doesn't recognize him, like they won't recognize anybody else who's done anything. And that is the problem about where we are with Luthuli today. Luthuli today is full of cowards. It's full of people whom look at the ANC as a form of employment. They don't put the country first. They don't put the organization first. They put whomever is in charge first. I don't know if I'm making sense. And that is where the problem is, because whomever's in charge gets to dictate the terms of the day. Umsholozi did not dictate. I can tell you right now, and you can go check Mzwane's minutes of meetings. I was there. And people are busy going around and blaming him about mining charter and changing rules. We were the people whom said and said, guys, we are pleading, give us this. And you know, when you know one thing about a true leader, when Comrade Carl, a true leader is the one who's gonna listen and say, okay, fine, what is your issue? You say no, but our issue is that the Glencoe and South 32 and these guys, they just load us on the vendor, but they don't give us what do you call it? They don't give us order numbers. Then the leader will say, okay, well, how do you guys propose to do that? And then you say, no, can we not make rules that would, and then we went and we changed those rules. They went and they changed those rules. And you know what? Msebenzi Zwane got persecuted for that, because from him, he went and forced, you know what? People must get this whole thing of having a 50+1 that is not benefiting everyone is wrong. And that is where the problem is, guys. And today we are where we are with Mr. Palafala himself, because Mr. Palafala from day one, he was never part. I ask you when I come to Carl, and I hear these Tuma minions and people who, there's a problem about people who know politics from Sowetan, or they know politics from Sunday Times and Twitter and everything, and they think, you know what, I can comment. Some of us, we grew up, when my father used to send me with 2 rands to go buy Castle and Stuyvesant, and they come back on a Sunday, they would read newspapers and talk politics. That's how far I go back with politics. But the issue here today, where we find ourselves, is that you and Advocate Mkhwebane and Botali and everyone, you are subject to persecution, particularly Umtanaga Kunyamanzi. Yabona, that man is suffering the highest crime because he took the black man and said, hey, when pega lapha, there's a hole. And you, Carl, and Tuli, not Tuli, that ugly man, Mkhwebane, you, Mkhwebane, Dali, and everyone, even Julius, you guys are trying to show us the hole there. And that is where the problem is. But I'm going to leave it there. I just want you to know that, you know what, the issue here, we are looking at Palafal and all these things. Palafal was bought a long time ago. We know that. And I'm not going to stand aside or look the other way like some many cadres in the NEC and whatever, and pretend like I'm not seeing what is happening. I am seeing what is happening. But my biggest cry is that my children, if I let this injustice continue with Namalala, it means tomorrow my child can be accused of whatever it is, because you've seen yourself, when I come to Carl, you've seen for yourself that this prosecution in South Africa, unlike the rest of the real world, in the real world, they say you are innocent until proven guilty. But in South Africa, check what's happened with Comrade Ace, and yourself as well. This prosecution says you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent, which is pervert. It's perverted mental. It cannot work in even in the banana republic. It doesn't work like that. But in this country, because why? You don't have the resources to vindicate yourself. The state has got all the unlimited resources, which is why they must prove that you are guilty. But look at what happened with Umtanaga Kunyamanzi. Umtanaga Kunyamanzi, what happened with him? He was guilty before he was innocent. Same thing with any other. Ace is guilty before he's innocent. You guilty before you're innocent. It's like it's like the dog is wagging the tail here. And this thing is going to, one thing I've seen over the years, and one thing I was told, Tabu, you must shut up and stay out of politics, my son. Yes, yes.
Try to wind up, please, my brother.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let me wind up quickly. Now, the issue here, Comrade Carl, we cannot be standing aside, guys. It will be sad, because we will be setting a very bad precedent if we look away from what is happening. What is happening, irrespective whether Comrade Zuma did steal the money. Is there evidence? No. And if we're going to say, what technicalities, then we've missed the whole plot. Because now what we're saying is now the dog is wagging the tail, whereas the tail is the tail is wagging the dog, whereas the dog is wagging the tail. So in that nutshell, gentlemen, I'd like to say thank you for this platform. It's a very inspirational and it's very motivating. And guys like us are here. We're not going to sit by and let the future of our children be compromised. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabu. I'm going to hand over to Dave Gaiba. And after that, I'm going to give an opportunity to Mzwanele, Manyi, and Paul Ngobeni to respond to this part of the inputs that have been made. I don't want to go on further at this point, because then we will lose some of it. And after they have given an input, we will then open for a last number of people who've requested to speak and give them the opportunity to speak. So now I'm handing over to Dave Gaiba, or also known as Agent Dave Gaiba, I see here on his Twitter handle.
Thank you so much, Cole, for allowing me. Just first, sorry, there's a little doggy next to me. So just first thing I want to say is I don't like to talk to factionalism. I think it's part of the problem in the country, and politics is part of the problem. I would like to ask some questions to Mr. Manyi and Mr. Paul Ngobeni, and even to the other legal minds like Dalian Pofo, Advocate Mpusiso. First of all, that young man that spoke just now, student. So what do we leave for the future legal students if already he's a student and he's questioning the system? Secondly, I want to just point out that we actually have a institutional crisis in this country, and there's enough prima facie evidence to prove that point. First of all, I was listening to the entire Zondo Commission, and Mr. Ramaphosa sat there and he said he knew of specific incidents of corruption, but he decided to remain and resist, as if that somehow became a new legal term to excuse one of being complicit. Secondly, we had the Chief Justice at the time, Chief Justice Mogoeng, stating publicly 100 million rand by an American billionaire and an open checkbook to modernize the courts. And it was done by a middleman in South Africa. So on a couple of these issues, there's many. I actually wrote to Judges Matters, because if people read the Judges Code of Conduct, they are acting against, they're on breach of their own code of conduct. And also, in fact, of the fact that the president made himself complicit to corruption in front of the now Chief Justice, and he just laughed and smiled it away. So I took their own their own code of conduct and broke it down where they are exactly in breach. And Alistair Tilley, which is the senior person there, actually just responded basically by saying, sorry, we can't do anything. That's the response. Now we have a constitutional crisis, not just based on that. Looking at the big business involvement of Mr. Ramaphosa, looking at the Glencore issues that are now resulting for us in South Africa in load shedding, because once he was a chairman in one of those coal mines, Shanduka was a shareholder in Glencore. They suddenly, when they took over, they increased the price of coal from like 400 Rand to over 1,000 Rand. And there's so many issues, the Pala farm gate. But I questioned one person, also an MP on Twitter, and I asked him, why don't they use the Constitution against Ramaphosa for being in breach of the Constitution on the vaccine mandates issue? And then he responded and said, into our Constitution to basically bypass our Constitution. Now, this is a very big problem. And the people call that you listen, all the speakers here, I don't think the people are talking about factionalism anymore or politics anymore. The people are talking about a constitutional crisis in this country. And the legal minds sitting here and the legal minds involved and behind politics should get out of politics and start facing on the issues at hand, because this country is going down the drain very fast. Lastly, I'll try and keep it short and sweet, is the issue of who drew up this constitution. That question should be seriously raised. I've spoken personally to people that are involved, billionaire banker families that were physically involved in drawing up the constitution in South Africa. And they are also involved in drawing up the new legislation that passed a full constitutional bench in 2020, right? That will be pushed forward. We know there is a coalition government coming. No, we know they want to drop the ANC below 50% to bring this new government system in. That's facts. It's on record. So what are we doing? Are we just all playing along? Are we just all playing politics with the lives of 60 million South Africans? Are we just playing factionalism and division while nothing is really changing for the people of this country? So I call this, we have a constitutional crisis. And Carl, you mentioned when you started your space, you're looking at protests later in this month. Don't protest factionalism. Protest a constitutional crisis and unite the people of this country behind it, because they will come out in numbers. If there's no violence and if it's fact-based, the people of this country will unite. Carl, you guys have been in the struggle. I fully understand the history. I, like the previous speaker spoke, I can remember like yesterday every incident that happened in this country since '94 and even before. And I know a lot of things behind the scenes that happened as well. That's all speculation and ruble, but it's actually factual truth. So it's time to start a new revolution. It's time to bring new change to this country. And you guys have the know-how. You guys have you have the know-how. So
very valuable contribution that you made. And I want to assure you that the broad civil society protest that we're talking about is political, but it is definitely not party political. And we do not have any intention for it to be factional. And I agree with you. A significant part of what we need to act on is the constitutional crisis that we are faced with in South Africa now. And the manner in which the law and the implementation of justice in South Africa is on a daily basis being compromised and abused for party factional political reasons. I now want to Ngobeni, and as I've indicated, then we will go for another series of inputs from people who've requested to speak. But obviously, there must come an end to this Twitter space like all of them. I honestly do not think we can go beyond 8:30 at the very latest, 8:45. I'm now handing over to Mzwanele Manyi.
Yeah, very briefly. I think a lot of other inputs were comments and what have you. So we welcome all those comments. Everything said is welcome. But maybe to the specific questions, Lou said, what is it that needs to happen? He seemed to express a lot of frustration that we've got a man that is a law unto himself. Indeed, we've got this challenge, but there are other parties in parliament, like the one I belong to, unashamedly, the African Transformation Movement. What that party has done, it has submitted a motion to set in motion an inquiry called Section 89 in terms of the Constitution. Now, Section 89 is the removal of the president. And the ATM is very clear that with the transgressions that the president has had, it is competent for the president to be removed, because the president has, as we speak here and now, has actually violated his you can do this. And we've also submitted it in terms of that rule, and it's been submitted also made reference to the transgressions in the constitution, and evidence was given for each of these things and all of that, you know. So it's a watertight case that has been given. So we hope that in this coming week, the Speaker is going to announce that the Section 89 Committee of Inquiry is going to roll out in Parliament. So that's the one thing on that one. And in terms of Agent Dave Gaiba, as to the things that he had raised, just two issues. One, Ramaphosa says he knew the corruption and all that. Indeed, you know, in fact, it's a very interesting point that Dave is raising. In the submission to Zondo, when they were talking about the state capture, Ramaphosa says he had 5 options to deal with the matter, having been aware that this has happened. And of all the options that he had opened to him, he did not list an option of reporting this crime. So there you are, right in front of the highest judge in the land. Ramaphosa says, I was aware of a crime. I did not take the option of reporting the crime as required by the law. So he breaks PRECA Act wherever he is. Whether he's in his Palapala farm, he breaks PRECA Act. Whether he's in the Zondo Commission, he breaks the PRECA Act. And nothing happens to him. And Zondo just smiles and becomes very courteous to the man and just leaves him to just be. So this is one other reason why Zondo is not really fit to be a judge, because the man has got no sense of justice. He is so biased, he can't help himself. So that's the issue that we have. And then Dave also is talking about who drew up the constitution. By the way, I asked this question myself to the former DCJ, Mzwanele, one of the, whether it's 2015, 2016, there was something happening there at the constitutional hill. I attended that function. In fact, I must say I was traumatized there because there were all these people from London, Lord so-and-so and Lord so-and-so with all these wigs and all of that. It was a very scary situation. But be that as it may, I was part of that to just listen when the constitution was being celebrated. And they mentioned the countries that were consulted in drawing up the constitution. Countries like Canada, UK, Germany, India, US, and also the principal document, Magna Carta, which is from the UK, that was the basis of our constitution. And as they were listing these countries, one thing that was very peculiar was the absence of any one of the African countries. One would have thought, for instance, that a country like Ghana, which was amongst the first countries to get independence in the continent, would have been one country that would, and also independence from the English. One would have thought that that's one of the countries that would have been consulted. I mean, that country has produced serious people like Ngwame. I mean, you would have thought that if you have a Nkrumah country, you must go there and then consult just to learn what is it that you can do now that you guys have got independence before us. None of the African countries, it's really a shame that in our constitution, none of the African countries was ever even consulted. I'm not even going to talk to the individuals writing the constitution. The fact that our constitution was based on Magna Carta, the fact that none of the African countries was consulted in drafting this constitution is a very clear sign that this constitution this constitution was not done in the best interest of the locals, as it were. You can even look at how even the customary law is accommodated. The customary law is accommodated to the extent that it does not contradict the constitution. But what does that mean? It means to the extent that you don't contradict the Roman English Dutch law that is there. So as Africans in this country, even the constitution is made us, what you call it, subservient to other powers in Europe and elsewhere. This is why we have these kinds of problems. So indeed, there's a lot that needs to be done in the constitution of this country. Even if you go to the land issue, there's a section there on section 25, subsection 7, which has got a date, 19 June 1913. So all these Kulubala about expropriation without compensation, whatever else, all of that is actually from 1913 onwards. So all the land that was taken before 1913 is not in discussion. That land is gone. So you've got a constitution here that has actually sanctified, that has actually legalized the looting of the land. This is what we have. And you've got the ruling party, and I want to challenge all the ANC members that are in this forum, and I want to put it very clear to them that, in fact, the attitude of the ANC on the land question is actually a sellout attitude. I mean, this nonsensical amendment happening in Parliament, where the ANC goes to the world and say that they're busy with expropriation without compensation. When they get to Parliament, they don't do that. They do expropriation with nil compensation, something fundamentally different from expropriation without compensation. We don't have time to go into the detail, but I can tell you now, trust me, it's fundamentally different. It's not the same. With nil compensation, you continue to compensate. This is why Section 25(2)(b) that says with compensation is not even a consideration to be changed by the ANC. So actually the ANC continues to lie to the public and say this is what we're doing, when in the truth of the matter, they're not doing this that they're saying they're doing. Why is it that the ANC is lying to the public? You know, and I would like, if there's anybody in the media here, please invite me and any head honcho of policy in the ANC. Let me debate this in full view in any of the radio stations. I'm telling you here and now that the ANC has sold out in terms of that discussion. And by the way, if expropriation without compensation is not feasible, let's have that discussion, but people must not be lied to. This is my problem. ANC must not lie to the people and say they're pushing this policy when they are not. So I'm just concluding here by saying, in terms of the Constitution, a lot really needs to be done to make the Constitution talk to the values of all of us. Right now, what this Constitution has done, it has actually continued to domesticate Africans, to continued to treat Africans as, call it, servants of the hegemony of Europe and the US and all that. That is the problem. So we will be at each other's throats here because the fundamental document does not talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And your remarks about that the ANC is not implementing expropriation of land without compensation is absolutely correct. It is a blatant lie. And the resolution that had been passed at the 54th National Conference of the ANC in 2017 is definitely not being implemented. I was hoping to hand over to Paul Ngobeni now, but as Mzwanele Manyi was speaking, Paul disappeared here from my screen. I want to give an opportunity to Tsepo Khadima to come in to make a couple of remarks, and in the meantime, we will be looking out for Paul to bring him in. If he doesn't come in at this stage, we will then go to another 5, not more, 5 speakers. And hopefully by the time we're through with those speakers, Paul will be back on the platform. I also want to make a comment quickly about not only the Constitution. Yes, there are serious questions that need to be answered about who actually wrote the Constitution and where the inputs and consultations about what the Constitution came from. But another issue that concerned me over years is what happens with the Department of Finance and the Treasury. We have seen more legislation being written and presented through the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee of Finance by the Department of Treasury than any other department in government. And that legislation, I can assure you, is not written in the department. It is written by private sector companies that then feed the legislation into the Department of Finance via then eventually the Portfolio Committee on Finance. One of those that is critically involved in this writing of legislation that favors the private sector, and specifically white monopoly capitalism, is Goldman Sachs. We need to look into this situation, and we need to find out how it is that our government Department of Finance is a conduit for legislation being written somewhere else and then being put into Parliament and being adopted. I'm now handing over to Tsepo Khadima. If Tsepo is still online, it seems that a number of people are falling off the platform at the moment. Tsepo has also, while I was speaking, disappeared. So I want to start then to give a number of the speakers who've requested to speak to come in, and we'll try to bring Tsepo and Paul back onto the platform to make their inputs. David Skosana, you've requested to speak. I'm handing the mic over to you.
Good evening, Carl, and Mr. Manyi, and Tsepo, and everyone on the space. You know, my contribution tonight will be, I'll stick to the topic, you know, that President Zuma has been prosecuted in the country. And I guess for those patriotic citizens, those citizens who are still not contaminated and brainwashed by the media and some courts in this country, will realize now that we have different laws for different people, in particular with our former president. For some of us, we have been accused, you know, people will be saying that we are pro this, we are pro that. It's not about that. Comrades are comrades, and we are all equal. And some of us suffered as well. We were kept under solitary confinement for our own revolution at that time, when we were still fighting for this country. And we are not saying anyone owes us anything, that therefore, because my dad or my brother or my cousin or myself, because I've been there in the forefront of the liberation, therefore somebody's owing me anything. But we have to be honest. You look at the comrade judge president, comrade Chief Justice Zondo, flip-flopping. One, I will say this. In the recent Zondo report, Zondo is saying to us that, I'll just give you an example, Carl. Brian Molefe was appointed by the Gupta family, or Atul, or whoever the brothers were. I don't know their names well, but I know they always say one of them had an influence. But we have the president who goes to the Zondo Commission and says, I'm the one who recommended and said Brian Molefe has to be appointed. But got these so-called gut feelings. You know, I don't know what gut feeling is, but I guess a gut feeling is, you know, like umprofiti or inyanga will say, perhaps I've seen this, you know, in advance. In a feeling, you would see tomorrow you might get caught or you might die. You know, I'm saying I'm surprised that we have a Chief Justice who behaves in that manner. And like the other speaker who said, when President Ramaphosa went to the Zondo Commission, in other words, he was telling us that he's concealing crime, because he said he knows how our public funds were splundered for whatever reason in our movement. And I'm saying, being a proud member of the African National Congress, sometimes I get ashamed of myself to stand in front of people to say I'm a really cadre and a member of the African National Congress, because our leaders have allowed these so-called courts to run this country. This country is run somewhere in Braamfontein. The country is not run in parliament. Parliamentarians are there for their own benefits. They are no longer representing us. Anything after the Nkandla judgment, anything goes to court. You know, even before, in particular with Comrade Darling Pofu from the EFF, then you know, because always they associate him with that, even if it's only on his professional duty. You know that there's a plan. These people are planning so well that they're going to deal with particular people who are really trying to help and disrupt the status quo. And I can tell you the sin of Mcholozi, with all his faults, was to emancipate black people and to empower black people in this country. And I can tell you it didn't sit well with the so-called clever blacks. You know, you have the clever blacks in this country who feel that they are entitled to our lives. They can decide wherever they sit, you know, and decide about our plight as Africans. And I can tell you, that was the only reason why today, for the first time in the history of this country, that a constitutional court took a decision to sentence somebody because of all the things which I said earlier. Nothing else is because of the empowerment of the black people. The status quo and the establishment would not allow that. And I can tell you, they are using all the courts. The court has lost credibility in my eyes. They've lost integrity. For me, if you say you are going to take me to court, for formality's sake, I'll go to court. But I know exactly. I already know the judgment. That the judgment would be a negative. It depends who you are. And I'm sorry that all of us, we have failed Umsholozi. You know, we failed him. We've allowed these people to continue harassing him. They are still even harassing him today. You read the newspaper, Nicholas, in one of the business time lives, he was talking about Andy Direte and the Obeneza that they, in fact, they're supposed to get accolades because they've done well at ESCOM to save us from this low church heading. You know, I'm saying to you, the plan, Carl, is to make sure that the ANC dies. They are promoting all these stooges and puppets, your Mashabas and others. There's many of them. They are pushing for this so-called they want to call coalition government in 2024. And I can tell you, if you don't now stand up, you know, as Africans, in particular, Black Africans, we have to have the EFF, the Black Conscious Movement, it is still there, the PAC, the Azapos of this world, to stand together and defeat this establishment. Because the establishment is able to identify some among us to fight their battle and thinking that they are fighting for us as Black people. They are not doing that. They manage their plan. If you remember Verwoerd, a dream and philosophy.
David, can you wind up, please?
Yes. For me for me to contextualize what I was saying now is to say, if we fail now to rise up against the injustice in this country, and people are saying we must be an abiding law citizen in this country. But if the judiciary is failing us, we've seen what they've done to Msholozi, we've seen what they've done to some judges, Judge Tope, Advocate Dalimpofu. We've seen these things. And if we are still sleeping, we are still cheating, we are not doing anything. I can tell you now, Khan, this will be the death of the African National Congress, and it will die in the hands of the so-called clever blacks, your Mavusos of this world, your Snookies Vigalal of this world, all these gatekeepers. These gatekeepers, Sheriff Kegerolas, and I can name them. In fact, that NEC, which is, you know, I don't even have an adjective how to describe my own leaders, but I can tell you now, power has an expiring date. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Can you please mute your mic? David, can you mute your mic, please? I'm going to give an opportunity to Tsepo to quickly come in, but before I do that, can I please request the speakers to try and be a little bit shorter and also not to repeat yourself. I've been quite indulgent in allowing speakers to continue to go on and on. But it is a bit selfish from you if you speak that long, because you do not then allow the opportunity for more of the people on the platform to make their inputs. Tsepo, do you want to come in at this stage, or would you like to wait until we finish this round of inputs?
Let's finish this round of inputs, Bangazit. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm asking Koshishensha Shezi. Remember, I told Comrade Shezi that when he made the original input about the Ramaphosa Must Go campaign, that we will give him an opportunity to come in on the issues around Msholozi and what we are discussing tonight, and I'm now giving him that opportunity. But please, Comrade Shezi, as I've requested from everyone else, can we try to keep our input shorter so that we give more people the opportunity to speak? Thank you. It seems that Comrade Shezi has disappeared from the platform again. I think we should move on. I'm asking Casey Selepe, who's requested the mic, to speak. Casey, if you're still there, can you unmute your mic to speak, please? Okay, Casey is not responding. Andre Young, I'm giving the mic to you.
Good evening, Carl. Good evening, Tsepo. Apologies, I just said
you loud and clear. You can.
Good evening, Tsepo. Thanks for the invitation on the WhatsApp group with Mzwanele and the guys. Good evening, Mzwanele. Carl, everybody, thank you so much for allowing us to, as South Africans, have this conversation and for inviting input. But, you know, as I listen to you all, what's clear to me is that I think we're looking at the game of South Africa, its players, and we're pointing at the players and associating blame, but not really understanding the true context of what's really at play here. I mean, South African history is really needing to be understood in the context of all the systems and the historic shifts in all these systems, whether that be political, whether it be economic, legal, you name it, okay? But really, there's a shift that has not shifted, and that is the conflict and the competition that's gone on for hundreds of years, since before 1652. We've allowed the conflict and the competition and the corruption to really defocus us from the true issues. And when I listen to Mzwanele describe it so beautifully, you know, we came in this 1994 period, wrote a constitution based on Roman Dutch law. That didn't change the power and ideology that has governed the history of this beautiful country for centuries. We just put a new constitution in place to maintain the power and ideology game that's been played for hundreds of years. Now we say we have a constitutional crisis. No, we don't have a constitutional crisis. We have a constitution maintaining the power ideology play of the year, of 500 years. We have a historical context where we are never going to allow the land to be shared by all and the benefits to be had by all. We can see this because really we've become emotive about the land disposition issue, okay, and thought that that's the national issue. It is a national issue, but really the exclusion of Blacks, Africans, from all forms of human capital development that is required post-modernization, now into the digital and knowledge age, is what is the key fault line that's been constraining the Rainbow Nation. How we manage to remove the conflict and the competition to make sure that everybody benefits will not happen in the current legal system because the Constitution is created to specifically exclude them. You politicians, I watch you guys, play the game, actors on the stage that has been set for you. But you really don't understand that you're just playing by a power ideology, game plan, philosophy that was baked in since 1900. Go and read. Go and read Jan Smart's books on holism and evolution. They baked it into the system to make sure that there will never be a cessation of conflict and competition. We will keep you guys fighting, ATM versus ANC versus. They'll keep you fighting so that the power and ideology and the real decision makers of who controls this beautiful land is not known to all. So I think my call and my request, Tsepo, Carl, Mzwanele, Dali, Agent Dave, you know, how do we come together? Not black and white. Everybody. Black, white, Indian, how we all come together to really understand the evolution that's required and create a philosophical future and a practical implemented future where the legal system catches up with the intent, where the political system catches up with the intent, where the economic system and the rules in each of these ecosystems catches up with the intent of creating a better life for the people of this beautiful land. But I think to point at Cyril and his non-playing, I mean, the guy's protected. He's not going to get touched. They proved it. The minute President Zuma tried to play, they took him out faster than he could blink. We're looking at Cyril, we're looking at Zuma, we're looking at Mbeki, we're looking at Mandela, and we're blaming our leaders. And I'm going, hey, whoa, the game is bigger than these few players on the stage. This game has been played for hundreds of years. Roman Dutch law is at the core of ensuring poverty of people. Come on, let's play together. Let's cooperate. Let's adjust to each other. Let's start tolerating our differences and really understand the power and ideology play and what needs to be dismantled in order for South Africans, my children, your children, Mzwanele, so that they can enjoy South Africa, so that we can be, like the Springboks did last night, the winners. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Andre. I'm handing the mic over to Spe. Spe, can you unmute your mic, please?
Yes, it has been unmuted. Thank you, Mr. Carl, for the platform. I'd like to, good evening to everyone. Tsepo, Mr. Tsepo, Mr. Mzwa, and everyone who's listening at home. I'd like to touch base on two things. I don't want to get off script like some of my speakers before me. But I'd like to highlight this to you guys. The problem that we have as South Africans is that we cannot deal with the problem at hand because we cannot stick to the script. Like in this Twitter space today, I think the main topic here was about the persecution of Mr. President Jacob Zuma and the protest that will be held. I think we were supposed to be asking questions, and Mr. Carl and the co-host and Mr. Mzwanele, sorry for that, were supposed to answer our questions. And we were not supposed to come here and lecture. We've been listening to you guys lecturing us for hours now. And it's been like, since 5, we've been listening to your lectures. We're supposed to be asking questions. I'll leave it there and ask the question. Mr. Carl, can you guys please give us the dates for the protest and what the protest is about? Brief us on that one again. And can you kindly please state to make this clear? Is the protest a peaceful and calm protest? What kind of protest will this be? And about the persecution of Mr. President Jacob Zuma, we did not know that Mr. Zuma, that the media was captured. When Mr. Jacob Zuma was bashed by the media during his term of office, many South Africans didn't know the truth. We didn't even know that the media was captured. And we truly regret believing the media of what have been said by Mr. Zuma. And so now we only learning about this now. Can you kindly please have more Twitter spaces like this one going forward? And one thing that is not on topic that I'd like to add on, can you kindly maybe on another day, please teach us more about the breaks during Mr. President Jacob Zuma's time in office, and what was it all about? We still believe that that was the way that could have brought us light into South Africa before the president now, whoever Ramaphosa or whatever. And number 4, the Constitution, the subsection there, I think it's chapter 5, subsection 102, which is vote motion of no confidence. Can that not be used in our advantage to remove Mr. Ramaphosa in office? And what if not, can you please kindly explain what is stopping the parliament from doing that? And number 4, and lastly, I'd like to question, that other speaker who spoke about exile, his father going to exile since 1974 to 1976. So please follow me and please send me a DM so that I'd like to discuss something with him, and I'd like to enlighten him on something and not on this platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Spe. Let me answer your question about the protest. It is going to be a broad community, civil society protest. It's not going to be party political. It will be in all of its substance and in its execution legal. It will be within the boundaries of the law. It will be peaceful, but we want it to be a mass protest reflecting the various sectors of society that are concerned and outraged by the actions of President Cyril Ramaphosa. And the demand of the protest is clean and clear. Ramaphosa must go. With regards to the other issues, I am sure that Mzwanele Manyi will respond to your question around that particular subsection of the Constitution that deals with a motion of no confidence in the president. And we will then proceed with responding to some of the other questions. Of course, there had been statements, there had been questions. I've allowed both because that is the nature of this kind of platform. It is a platform where those who participate are allowed to vent their emotions and at the same time also ask questions in order to get more information. I'm handing the mic over to Charmaine. Charmaine, can you unmute your mic if you're still there?
Thank you. Here. I'm still here. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Please proceed.
Yes. As a South African, I am so saddened that, based on your topic, that an 8-year-old is still being prosecuted, and at this point in time, is assumed to be guilty, even though he hasn't been judged or a case gone through where he's found guilty by the state. As South Africans, why are we sitting back and allowing this, even though we can see that it's wrong? As a parent of a male or of boys, I'm so worried that mostly South African men are sitting back looking at this happening in our country and not considering that in the near future it might be happening to them and their own families, where they are being prosecuted before even being proven that they are completely guilty. That's just on my side. And I want to know what's the process of the parliament, like what Spear was asking, to vote, to do a vote of no confidence. on the president, and what's holding us back as South Africans, because there's so much evidence to show that quite a number of laws have been broken. And why are the judges sitting back and not acting on all of this? Thank you so much for the platform.
Thank you, Charmaine. I'm going to hand the mic to Godfrey. Tsepo, can I ask you to look out for Mzwanele Manyi? He's disappeared from the platform. I'm trying to locate him. If you can assist me with that, I'll appreciate it. Godfrey, the mic is yours. Godfrey, if you're still there, can you unmute your mic to speak, please? Okay, Godfrey is not responding. Ntombensha Nkiza, the mic is yours. Okay, Ntomenza is also not responding. Then I give to Doctorum. Doctorum, the mic is yours. Tsepo, can you indicate to me if I'm still audible, because there's a number of people who are not responding to my requests for them to take the mic. Tsepo?
You're very much audible and clear.
Okay, I don't think we are getting responses from those that I have just asked to speak. I'm handing over to you, Tsepo, to speak. And after that, we're winding up.
Bangazita, thank you very much. I think from what we've heard, it's clear to me that as South Africans who really have got the well-being of this country at heart, more so because we were born in this country, can sit back and allow the situation to continue, whereof the judiciary, it can be argued that the judiciary in South Africa is captured. The judiciary in South Africa is got elements within it that are patently corrupt, unfortunately corrupt at the highest level. And also it is very evident that, in fact, as much as the title of the conversation tonight was premised on the egregious violation of President Jacob Zuma's constitutional rights, but actually it appears that this violation is so widespread to the extent that, in fact, every single South African's constitutional rights have been violated, unless or otherwise they are part of the clique, the very small minority, and the compradors who work for that small minority. And those compradors, unfortunately, having been given the levers of power and therefore presiding on what I can arguably but very strongly say that it is a fascist regime of Cyril Ramaphosa. So where we are after this space tonight, it is very evident to me that there has to be action, because where we are today, there is absolutely no court order that can be said to be valid, more so because when the judiciary are themselves misapplying the law, and in the manner that they have, and in the cases that have been mentioned, it therefore begs the question that what is the point? Does it matter that we should still believe that there is a judiciary? And that brings us sharply into the territory and to the arena of self-help. And self-help is when the citizenry have given up all hope. They have lost totally any faith or trust in the state, and the state in terms of parliament, in terms of the executive, in terms of the judiciary. And that unfortunately leads the road to anarchy. So it appears to me that there is urgent action required to have total cleanup and operation Mrambatswina of our judiciary. And some people might have been horrified when they had Rob Hessoff making mention that we have to make changes in the judiciary. Whatever reasons that he had, which we might suspect that perhaps they were not according to what is good for this country, in terms of the changes in the judiciary, it appears to me that we have no option but to have to agree with him that there has to be an operation Murambatsuna. We have to remove everybody in the judiciary, starting with the Chief Justice. And it is therefore good to hear that ATM, as Mzwanele Manyi has spoken, that ATM is taking action for the removal of Raymond Zondo, the removal which is long overdue, because Raymond Zondo has got immense power as the head of the judiciary. So beyond the call for Ramaphosa to go, and I say that Ramaphosa must go to Hoshimamburu prison, Raymond Zondo himself must vacate the hallowed corridors of the judiciary of South Africa, because under him, we are going to be in a state of anarchy. And I think what legal expert Paul Ngobeni, the warnings that he gave, we must not take those lightly, because it means that we will have no country. I think we are not on the verge, but we are truly a sad African republic, as based on the conduct of not only the judiciary, not only the executive, but also with parliament, and more so with the party with the majority in parliament having presided and condoned the likes of Pala Gate, Farm Gate, and having condoned the unlawful conduct of the president who usurped power and effectively seized power at the center, and he's now in total control of all the what would have been otherwise being independent organs of state. Whether you're talking about the public protector, you're talking about the NPA, you're talking about the police, any one of those, we are talking about state security, he has seized power at the center, and that cannot be good for any democracy, let alone this democracy. So we are in danger, and one cannot overemphasize the danger that this republic is under, which action must be taken. So let's hope that henceforth people will be conscientized. They will have hope and confidence that indeed we can defeat this evil monster of a totalitarian fascist regime that has destroyed or is destroying this country. Thank you, Mbagazit.
Tepo, I want to ask you to just make a short comment about the issue of no confidence and the provisions for a no confidence vote in the Constitution and how Parliament is dealing with that issue. You will recall that there was an ATM motion for no confidence. You know how the Speaker of the National Assembly played that one. And there was a question by Spare regarding the issue of no confidence and the provisions in the Constitution for that. Can you perhaps just give us a short input on that? I wanted Mzwanele Manyi also to speak to that, because the ATM was closely and directly involved, but unfortunately, he is no longer with us.
The motion of no confidence is a tool that is available, but it's not the most effective tool. In fact, its origins, remember, the Constitution of South Africa is what is called an allochthonous constitution, meaning that we have taken various parts from all parts of the world, from various constitutional schemes, and collated them into what we call the Constitution. It therefore cannot be the best constitution because it is contradictory. In fact, that section on motion of no confidence originates from the state of Bavaria in Germany, which they have since long abandoned, and therefore, in our case, that is got any meaning. But the action by the ATM, I believe it is the most effective course of action that they are taking, that of the removal of the president. And if it was under the US constitutional scheme, it would have been called impeachment. But all the same, the removal of the president, it is more effective, and in fact, it is more brutal. And in this case, the circumstances dictate for Section 89, which is the removal of the president based on the crimes that prima facie he is guilty of. And therefore, he has to be removed and not have to go through a motion of no confidence, because if he resigns or if he leaves under a motion of no confidence, he still keeps all the benefits of him being president, meaning that he will still have access. But the removal also carries with it the removal of all the perks, the privileges that goes with being a former president. And therefore, I think that is the most effective course of action which ATM has taken. The issue is this: will all the other political parties, including the African National Congress, support ATM, which is seen as a minority party, but it has a seat at the table and has really brought to the table what is a urgent and appropriate solution for the crisis that we are facing as a nation. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very useful. I think that what we are dealing with was an initial motion of no confidence by ATM. And as you correctly say, the provisions in the Constitution is not very helpful in that regard, especially for minority parties. The route that ATM has taken now is a considerable stronger position based on the criminal acts that the president had been involved in. I see that Mzwanele has finally joined us. I will give you an opportunity to speak in a moment. Just mute your mic for now.
I'm also back. I'm also here, Comrade.
I can only allow one person at a time to speak. And as I've said before, I do not allow people to insist that they must speak. So any of the other speakers who come and say, I'm also here, unfortunately, if we allow that in the platform, it doesn't work. But I was addressing this issue around the Constitution, about the actions that ATM has taken, and especially the criminality of President Ramaphosa and why he should be removed as a criminal, and therefore, as Tsepo quite correctly pointed out, should not be able to retain any of the privileges that a former president is due and entitled to have. I'm going to give to Comrade Mzwanele the opportunity to come in, since he is back with us, and make his final comments. The mic is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Carl. You know, this thing of wearing too many hats sometimes is a problem. The structure that is dealing with the issue of challenging the legality or the unlawfulness of Zondo being the Chief Justice based on the rationality of the decision of President Ramaphosa. The structure that is dealing with that is the Jacob Zuma Foundation. It's not ATM. Okay, just to clear that. That's the one thing. Then the issues of removing the president. There are two sections in the Constitution that deal with this matter. And each of the sections has got a different threshold. And they've got different reasons for both sections. If you look at the section 102 that people have spoken about, in terms of the motion of no confidence, the threshold to carry that through is only a simple majority, 50+1, as it were. And the reason for that are all the things that one has listed in terms of the president failing to lead this country, whether you look at unemployment, you look at load shedding, the whole lot that has caused people not to even trust this president that talks left and walks right and all of that. By the way, even on motion on that section 102, the ATM has also launched that motion. And the only problem that we had with that motion was that we wanted the motion to be voted for in secret ballot, because we know that some people in other parties get instructed which way to vote. So we said, well, if this happens, it means that people that would have otherwise wanted to vote out Ramaphosa, even in the ANC, will not have an opportunity to do that, because now if they have to raise hands, there will be consequences when they leave that National Assembly. So in order to protect everyone, we wanted this thing in secret ballot, and that has been going up and down the courts. Now I can announce here in this platform that on the 7th and 8th July, the issue of the secret ballot for Section 102 is actually going to be heard in the Western Cape High Court. So we hope that there will be a progressive decision there, that we can deal with the removal at a lower threshold of 51%. That's what is happening. Section 89 is also another removal section, but the threshold for Section 89 is higher, is a 2/3 majority. And that section deals with a gross violation of the Constitution. Again, ATM has raised that because now Ramaphosa has violated the Constitution, and we've made reference to Section 96 that he has violated. He has also broken another law, Section 34 of the PRECA Act, and so on. So whether you look at gross violation of the law, Section 89, which again, the Speaker is busy blocking, as I said before, whether you look at Section 102, even that one is at play. We're waiting for the outcome of the court on the 7th and 8th of July. People must look out for that in the Western Cape High Court. We hope that that decision is going to help us. So those are the two sections that deal with that. And Spare has been asking us to focus on the topic here. So I won't go too much into what Andre had said about basically how do we debunk the macro system. At another time, we'll have that discussion. We'll talk about decolonization. We'll talk about resigning from the Commonwealth and so on and so on. But it's a different topic altogether. But for these two, and Charmaine, I'm sorry, when Charmaine was speaking, I think there was something wrong with my connection. But I think she also had something to say about 102, Section 102, which I think I have addressed. I think I can leave it there. Thank you, Comrade Carl.
Thank you, Comrade Mzwanele. Unfortunately, Comrade Paul Ngobeni was taken out by load shedding, so we will have to do without his input, but we did benefit from the very valuable input that he made earlier. It is time to wind up, and I want to make a couple of announcements before I make my final comments. I want to remind you once again that on Tuesday, the 5th of July at 11 o'clock, we will have a press conference about the corruption and falling apart of our judicial system and the maladministration in the judicial system. We will have a number of people that are directly affected by this breaking down of the legal system in South Africa and the misfunctioning and malfunctioning of our courts. We will provide examples. We will do it on both a physical engagement with journalists and also on various social media platforms. It will be on YouTube, it will be on Facebook, and it will also be on Twitter Spaces. So we will try to reach as wide as possible an audience. Any one of you who want to come to that press conference and be physically present, you're most welcome to do so. Then on Wednesday, the 6th of July, which is the usual Twitter space that we will have at 7 o'clock, we're going to have a discussion about the real reasons and consequences of load shedding. And we will also look at what was recently revealed with regards to the discussions that Cyril Ramaphosa apparently had on the margins of the G7 gathering and the discussions that there was with Boris Johnson, the decommissioning of Eskom, and obviously the intention to privatize and sell Eskom off. These are very, very serious issues, and I will announce in the course of tomorrow and on Tuesday who the panel will be, but I can assure you that it will be a very appropriate discussion at this time, as we've had level 6 of load shedding and as the crisis is deepening. And I don't think we need to have any doubt that level 6 was specifically orchestrated and manipulated in order to coincide with the discussions that were taking place at the G7 between Cyril Ramaphosa and other role players, including Boris Johnson. This discussion that we had tonight was an indication of the depth of the crisis that we are faced with in South Africa in terms of our legal system. I agree with those who say that we have a constitutional crisis, both in terms of the origins of our constitution, but also in terms of the current execution of our constitution. In that context, each one of us as citizens have a responsibility to now actually take the action into our own hands. We have to get out on the streets. We have to mobilize. There's an old saying that says, you do not win political victories in the boardrooms or in the parliamentary chambers. You ultimately win them on the streets. And that is where we need to take this campaign, that Cyril Ramaphosa must go. At the same time, when we do so, we extend a challenge to our public representatives, to our members of parliament, members in the provincial legislatures, but specifically those in the National Assembly that face the motions that there are, both the motion of no confidence, but also the stronger motion of removal of President Ramaphosa that Mzwanele Manyi has referred to. I know that we want to create a protection for those MPs, especially the ANC members of parliament. That's why we want to see a secret ballot. But personally, I believe we've gone beyond that. We've reached the depth of crisis in South Africa today, that we've got the right to demand from each one of our members of parliament, also those in the African National Congress, that the time has come for them to now show their mettle, to grow a backbone, to stand up, and whether it's a confidential, secret ballot or whether it's an open ballot, to stand for what is right. I've said before, and I will repeat it again tonight in this concluding remarks. Those ANC members of parliament or any other member of parliament that fail to do the right thing now should be losing their right to be our public representatives. They do not deserve our trust. They do not deserve our vote. And finally, we want to once again extend our warmth and our gratitude to President Jacob Zuma for what he had done and sacrificed for this country, for the humiliation and the suffering and the injustices that he continues to face. And we know that the main reason why he's facing them is because he had stood up for the people of this country and want to see justice for our people. So we also ask of Comrade Mzwanele Manyi, as a representative of the Jacob Zuma Foundation, who is here tonight, to convey from this platform, from this Twitter space, our warm gratitude to President Zuma, and also our commitment, our unequivocal commitment, that we will continue to stand with him all the way. It has been quoted earlier tonight, but I want to say it again because I say it always. No soldier leaves another soldier behind on the battlefield. And this situation in which we find ourselves at the moment now is definitely a war. And President Zuma can be assured, as our commander, as our icon, we will never leave him behind. We will be with him throughout. And ultimately, the will of the people and justice will prevail. With those words, I sign off and I play out with President Zuma's signature song, Umshini Wami. Thank you and good night.